Mr. Shirley. Oh, come on. Don't lean back. Good evening. I would like to call this meeting to order at 6:31. I'd like to welcome everybody that is joining us tonight. Thank you. It's a great turnout. Happy to see a lot of faces in the room. We have agenda copies available outside on the outside table if you would like one. So thank you for being here and being involved in your community. But before we start, I want to thank my fellow commissioners for a great meeting last month with interesting insights and high integrity. And tonight, we have some of our most important large actions of the year. I thank the staff, the grant applicants, and the public who are here to speak on these items. Next item is roll call. Commissioner Kevin Bell. Commissioner Annette Lynn. Here. Commissioner Fernando Romero.
Here.
Commissioner Julie Solomon.
Here.
Vice Chair Linda Batten.
Here.
And Chair Ida Rose Sylvester. I am here. Next item on our agenda is minutes approval from last month. The minutes for the February 6, 2020 meeting have been delivered to the commission members and copies are available on the City Hall bulletin board. Do I have any amendments or corrections to these minutes?
Yes.
Julie.
There's some titles in the minutes from the February 6th meeting that just need to be updated to reflect who is the vice chair, who is the chair, etc.
Are they obvious or would you like to spell them out?
They're various, yeah, throughout the document. So, for example, instead of Commissioner Linda Batten, it should say Vice Chair, and instead of Vice Chair Ida Rose Sylvester, it should say Chair, etc.
Great, that's a really good catch. Thank you very much. Are there any other amendments or corrections? If there are no further additions or corrections, I would like a motion to approve these minutes.
I motion that we approve the minutes. I motion that we approve the minutes as written.
Do we have a second?
A second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. Next, we're going to move on to oral communications from the public. We will open the floor to comments, so if you come up to speak, please speak at the podium and into the mic. We have blue comment cards that you can hand to Christina. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to speak to the Commission on any matter that is not already on the agenda. You will be limited to 3 minutes. State law prohibits us from acting on any non-agendized items tonight. And I'd like to invite the first speaker up. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Hi, I'm Michael Kahn. I am a Mountain View resident, and I also teach in the Urban Studies program at Stanford. And I just wanted to speak very briefly to suggest an event that the HRC might consider as part of its Civility Roundtable series on bias for your next budget year. I understand that you're already booked up for this year, but something that you might consider for the fall of 2020 or maybe early 2021. One of the subjects that I teach about in urban studies, and one of the most, I think, insidious manifestations of bias in our community and in American cities more generally, is segregation in housing and discrimination in housing. And we are very fortunate in the Bay Area to have one of the leading scholars on housing discrimination. Richard Rothstein, I don't know if you're familiar with this book, The Color of Law, was published a couple of years ago to quite a bit of acclaim. He was on Terry Gross and got reviewed in all sorts of, major publications. And this brought a lot of attention to this subject of discrimination in housing and segregation, and particularly the ways that it was not only permitted but encouraged by the government for many years, and also the ways that it still goes on, and the ways that our communities can address it and work to diminish it in the future. And Professor Rothstein is very interested in getting the word out about this history and about this material. And back in the fall, he was invited to speak in the city of San Mateo. The event drew, from what I understand, about 300 people to come out and hear him speak at one of the churches in town. And then in Menlo Park, they did a follow-up event called the Color of Law Menlo Park Edition. They got together the Housing Leadership Council, Menlo Together, Tech Equity, the Community Equity Collaborative. They all sponsored an event to discuss the implications of his work in the community of Menlo Park. So my suggestion would be we could sort of combine these two kinds of events. We could invite Professor Rothstein to speak in Mountain View about the history that he writes about in this book, and then we could follow it with a community discussion about how this history has impacted Mountain View. I think this could be quite impactful, especially as we think about the ways that Mountain View is growing and building new housing, and how we can do that in a way that combats this kind of history. Thanks. I'll leave these with you if that's all right.
Please do. Thank you very much, Michael. Does anyone have any questions for the speaker? And I just want to thank you again, Michael. We met at the Leadership Mountain View event where I talked about bias, and that's how
I came to be
connection
here.
began. So
yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Do we have any other members of the public wishing to speak on a non-agendized item? Councilmember Lucas.
Thank you. Lucas Ramirez, Mountain View resident. Just very briefly, I wanted to thank the HRC and the members of the subcommittee working on the safe parking issue. I had an opportunity to canvass businesses with a couple of volunteers over the weekend, and it was an enlightening experience. We had a good opportunity to investigate potential lots for safe parking, collect contact information, and also inform business owners and property owners about the informational sessions that Supervisor Simitian is hosting, I think next week, to educate potential or property owners who may be potentially interested in hosting a safe parking site. It's not glamorous work, but it can be fun. I think I was most impressed by the receptiveness and just how friendly many of the folks we spoke with were, and how I think continuing this particular effort may bear some fruit as we continue to identify potential private lots for safe parking. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Ramirez. We really appreciate your support with the Safe Parking Subcommittee, and I would say it's very glamorous work. Okay, maybe I'm the only one who feels that way, but it's very, very important work, and it's a very positive outcome, I think, for all of us. No other questions from?
I second that.
Oh, thank you. It's like when the community comes together to solve problems, great things happen. Are there any other members of the public wishing to speak in public comment? If not, I will close this section of the meeting. Moving on to item 5, which is unfinished business. We have none. So moving on to new business, item 6, 6.1. We are starting with funding recommendations for fiscal year 2020 and 2021. Looking at community development block grants, which is CDBG, and Home Investment Partnership Home capital project funding requests. We will hold a public hearing to hear presentations from agencies who will be seeking the CDBG funding and home capital project funding and making recommendations for City Council consideration. Tonight, we are joined by Housing and Neighborhood Services Manager Tim Wong and Senior Planner Orlando Reyes-Rodas. Thank you very much for being here. We look forward to hearing the discussion and helping you provide direction on the public hearing protocols and requirements. So thank you.
So good evening again. Yes, thank you for that welcome. My name is Tim Wong. I'm the Housing and Neighborhood Services Manager, and tonight we will be presenting CDBG funding recommendations. You have to say CDBG a number of times before it rolls off the tongue, but we'll be presenting funding recommendations this evening for your consideration, which we will be taking the HRC recommendations then on to the City Council in April. But Orlando will be giving the presentation, so I'll be handing it off to him.
Good evening, Commissioners. Okay. So starting off on the CDBG, or Community Development Block Grant, the funding application process, I'll be providing an overview and then jumping into the review of the applicants, just to give you a little background. So the funding application process, the city does hold 2 public hearings prior to the approval and use of the funds. The applications are considered annually for capital projects and with public service programs, which are funded on a 2-year cycle. They won't be considered at this time, but they would be considered in the subsequent year. What is CDBG? Again, it's a Community Development Block Grant. It's an entitlement program of which the city receives approximately $530,000 annually. The purpose of the funds are to help address community development needs to support neighborhood and revitalization, economic development, improve housing opportunities and community services. It's a program that was established in 1974. Next slide here shows us the allocation. So based on the allocations, which on average have been approximately $530,000, for this year we received $592,761. The allocations are then broken into essentially 3 categories directly from that 592. The values in green represent the sum of the 592, the 3 categories being public service activities, planning and administration, and capital projects. The limits in terms of the 15%, the 20%, and 65% respectively with the capital projects are driven by the CDBG guidelines. So the values in green again represent the sum of the 592. Right below it are 2 additional categories, program income and reprogrammed funds. The program income, those are funds of which the city is receiving for either for repayment of existing CDBG funds through annual service. The reprogrammed funds of $435,000 represent funds that were either not utilized from prior awards and therefore reprogrammed for use at this point in time. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. To the far right, that column that says capital project allocations, the value of $1,132,367, that represents the total allocation for from CDBG dollars that can be used for capital projects. And that's the 385, which again is only 65% of the current allocation, plus prior year reprogrammed funds, plus existing program income. The activities in which the CDBG must meet in order to qualify for use of these dollars are these 3 objectives. First is to benefit low to moderate incomes that, according to HCD, is 80% or less of AMI, or the average medium income. The second is the prevention or elimination of slums or blight. And the third is to meet a particular urgency. For example, if there was an earthquake and a building gets damaged and there's an emergency there's an urgent need to address a building, those dollars can be used. So all applicants must meet one of these 3 criteria. Generally, the cities most of the activities have met the first objective, which is a low to moderate, which in the HUD guidelines, it represents that at least 51% of the area must have low to moderate income levels. Some examples of CDBG eligible activities are presented above. The ones highlighted in orange tend to represent the most common activities in the city of Mountain View, that being acquisition, rehab of residential and non-residential structures, and public services. Again, public services won't be considered at this point, but it would be considered in the next fiscal cycle. In terms of acquisition, just to elaborate on that, that means providing an applicant funds so that they may acquire a property for the purposes of creating affordable housing. The next program is called the Home Investment Partnership Program, which we administer. The city receives approximately $236,000 annually. The purposes or the use of home is slightly different in that it's related essentially to address the housing needs for low, very low households, as opposed to CDBG, which is flexible for services. The home allocations presented in front of you represent that for this current fiscal year, we have $273,160 available. The values in green, similar to the prior slide, represent that the sum of those equals $273,160. So of the $273,000 and change, 10% of it, or $27,000, can be used for planning and administration. 15%, or $40,974, would need to be set aside for community housing development organizations, or CHODOs. And the balance, 75%, or $204,870, could be used for capital projects. Below that, similar to the prior slide when we spoke about CDBG, there is again program income that's being received for repayment of prior home dollars that were dispersed. It's repayment of those. And the reprogrammed funds of $201,000. Reprogrammed funds, again, represent funds that were not utilized by prior awards, by prior recipients. I'll elaborate a little bit more on the $201,450. Notice that it says net reprogrammed funds. To highlight the net reprogrammed funds, the gross amount is right below, which represents $237,000. That $237,000 was awarded previously in 2019 to Palo Alto Housing Development Corporation. Of that $237,000, though, we need to set aside 15%, or $35,550, for a community housing development organization. So the balance that's left over is that $201,000 there. To the right of it, you'll see the $454,450. It's just to represent that for the current allocation, we have $204,000 for capital projects. The $454,000 can be utilized again for capital projects for the sum of $659,320. Eligible home activities, similar to, unlike CDBG, can be used to, as identified there, to provide home purchases or rehab financing assistance, to build or rehabilitate rental or ownership housing, demolition of housing to make way for home-assisted development, and tenant-based rental assistance. So for this fiscal year, we have 3 applicants which are with us today and are open to making short presentations. I will give you a brief synopsis of the 3. The first is a request for $980,000 for the acquisition of an existing property at 660 Mariposa. It's an apartment. The applicant is Bridge Housing, which is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to build and create affordable housing. The next is a request for $750,000 by the City of Mountain View Public Works Department for the development of Mora Ortega Neighborhood Park. Currently, there's raw land there, so it's just a vacant piece of parcel, or a vacant parcel. And then the third is a request for $12,000, $12,000 additional dollars requested for the repairs of the Graduate House. It's an existing single-family home that's being used as a shelter for the homeless. The property is owned and operated by Life Moves, a nonprofit organization. Again, the three applicants are here, and we'll be able at a later point to give you a little more detail about their applications. Some key considerations to take in evaluating these applications are, the next item is about the consolidated plan. It's a 5-year plan in which the city identifies the housing and community needs. That plan includes some goals that are identified by means of community outreach, some qualitative and quantitative data. These are the goals that we are using to consider the current applicants to see how they meet the goals as identified in the draft 2020 to 2025 consolidated plan. Again, the goals are within the draft 20 to 2025 plan. The goals were developed as a result of that outreach. As you see here, I've identified where the 3 applicants would fall. So the Graduate House responds to the lack of housing for homeless. Bridge Housing's acquisition of 660 Mariposa, or the preservation, is to increase affordable housing. That property is currently market rate. And then the third is to improve community and public facilities. That would be Mora Ortega Park. The slide in front of you reflects the staff report and original recommendations. I'm bringing this slide forward so that you can see that this slide has been revised, and I'll explain again why. So these are the numbers that you have in your current staff report. The items in green are the numbers that will be changing, and I'll again explain why. Here's the revised recommendations. The staff total recommendation is still the same to meet the needs of what's being requested, the $980 for 660 Mariposa, the $750 for Mora Ortega, and the $12,000 for the Graduate House. So that amount doesn't change. The values in green were changed. And the reason for that, as shown in this slide here, is because of the prior slide where we discussed the additional monies that were necessary for the CHOTO, or the Community Development Block, Community Housing Development Organization. Thank you, Tim. So that amount, which equates to essentially $76,524, is why we had to adjust the numbers downward, downward to reflect less of home and more of CDBG. This slide is just to reiterate what the prior council priorities were. It's more just as a refresher, but again, we are focusing on the current goals as reflected in the 2020 to 2025 consolidated plan. Some of the prior priorities still have the same elements in terms of ending homelessness, providing affordable housing, and supporting activities and programs that strengthen the neighborhood. In your staff report, you would have seen some assessment factors. Those assessment factors are items that the commissioner should take into consideration when reviewing the applications, such as the need for the project, the number and percentage of low-income Mountain View residents that would be served by these applications or these projects or activities, the leveraging of funds, the project schedule, and any green components. Again, that was an assessment factor found in your staff report. And finally, we have our staff recommendation. We are recommending for full funding as revised and shown on the presentation today for the 3 applicants. This final slide is just to show you the trajectory of what happens next. So we are March 5th, where we're hearing the capital funding and also the consolidated plan. Your recommendations would carry over to City Council to hear on April 28th. I will highlight that on April 2nd, we will bring again to the HRC the Assessment of Fair Housing. It's another document that's within the consolidated plan. We broke it up given the size and volume of documents, like over 200 pages or so. So these are some key milestones, April 2nd, April 28th, and then on May 15th, both the consolidated plan and the annual action plan, which would be the synopsis or summary of recommended actions to move forward on these activities. Whatever HRC recommends to council and what council finally determines, that would be folded into that annual action plan, thereby supporting the goals that are identified in the consolidated plan. Roughly in July or so is when if we move forward with these activities, is when contracts could be executed. And finally, on September 30th, HUD requires us to submit what's called a CAPER, or Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report. That is simply an annual summary of the activities that happened last fiscal year. It's it's a means of identifying metrics of how it performed, how the prior allocations performed. And with that finishes the presentation.
Great, thank you very much for the informative presentation. I think next we will take comments and questions from the commissioners.
Yes.
And after that, we will have public comment and then the presentations. Any questions for staff?
I have one question. So it looks as though even with the revised numbers, there will be some funds that will be left over unallocated. And so will those carry over to the next fiscal year? Is that how it works?
Yes, that is correct. They will carry over. HUD allows jurisdictions to carry over funds as long as it doesn't exceed 1.5 times their allocation. And so we are in this very unique circumstance where we have more money than applications, but we're very happy to be able to push these funds out the door while being able to, and also being able to meet the 1.5 times threshold.
Other questions? I have a question about the leftover unused Palo Alto housing money from, you said 2019. Why did that not get allocated or used?
They were able to find other cost savings for the project. Therefore, they did not need to use the approximately 800,000, no less.
200
yeah,
something.
600,000 in federal funds from the city.
Wow, okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the commissioners? And next, I should open it up to the floor for public comments. Do any members of the public wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, I would like to invite the applicants to give presentations up to 5 minutes. Let's see. The first one, 660 Mariposa Preservation by Bridge Housing. Oh. And does Commissioner Romero need to recuse himself from this item? Sorry, give us 1 second. Yeah, can you?
Yeah, so staff consulted before the meeting, and it's under our understanding that Commissioner Romero lives at that apartment complex.
Yes.
So our recommendation is for the commission to hear each of the projects, to vote on them separately. So when it comes to the vote, then Commissioner Romero can recuse himself for the vote for that
Oh, okay.
project.
And do I need to step out of the
Yes.
meeting? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Can Commissioner Romero ask questions and provide comment?
No.
Okay, thank you.
So if we're hearing from Bridge Housing now, you may recuse yourself to the committee room.
Okay, I would like to recuse myself. Okay, thank you. And after they finish their presentation and we take a vote, am I allowed to come back? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Don't go too far. Great. Sorry for the delay. Thank you very much. Do we? Who has that? Nice.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
My name is Cyrus Spy. I'm here with Bridge Housing tonight. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about 660 Mariposa and our plan over there. So just a little bit about Bridge first. We're founded in 1983. We're based in San Francisco, but I grew up out here in the South Bay. We're a nonprofit, mission-driven developer and property manager. Our mission is to provide housing from very low income. We're building permanent supportive housing down in Berkeley to moderate income and workforce housing. We've developed over 17,000 homes throughout California and the Pacific Northwest. And we haven't had that much of a presence in Mountain View, but we did one project, I think, in the 90s called The Fountains, a 124-unit senior project with MidPenn. And yeah, we kind of utilize all creative financing structures, and we have a cool S&P rating. So a little bit of background on Mariposa. We were, we were noticing that there were a lot of displacement projects happening out here. A lot of a little higher density, say Class B, C apartments were getting torn down in return for high-end townhomes. So this site in particular, 660 Mariposa, it was taken out to market for townhomes, and we proposed acquiring it and trying to figure out some preservation plan. Just the building itself, built in 1964, 48 units, 5 studios, 21 one-bedrooms, 22 two-bedrooms. It's got a little community room and a pool, a nice 10-foot pool. There's just a little geographic reference out there, a little bit off El Camino. So yeah, preservation here has always been the #1 goal. We can't put tax credits on it. Traditionally, our business model is, tax credit financing affordable housing projects. There are a couple things here. It didn't have 10-year ownership, and high land values out in Mountain View kind of limit what we can throw into tax credit eligible basis. So we came up with a little alternative formula, leveraging property tax exemption, and we are raising some social impact capital to help fund this preservation. The affordable program's pretty simple. In-place tenants get no greater than 4% fixed increases annually, and new households must have incomes no greater than 80% of AMI per HCD standards to qualify. And there's just a little chart on the 4% fixed increases and how it relates to affordable housing, because most of our affordable housing rents are benchmarked to TCAC rents. And that's a little chart on how it's, Santa Clara County has seen such strong growth in the past 5 years. So it's the 4% fixed increase ends up reconciling to how those rents have grown. So a little bit about the requirements. All residents, by the nature of housing, will be Mountain View residents. And right now, there's, I believe, three households that are over income per the income requirements, but we've committed to keeping them in place. So right now, it's not all, but it's a significant majority of the initial residents. We've done community meetings with the residents, and we've got verified household income data. So, and then eventually all tenants will be fit that category. So yeah, we're hoping to use these funds for the acquisition only. By using these funds, we will have to turn less to traditional financing sources, which will give us greater flexibility in the long run of managing the property and any issues that arise.
Great, thank you very much for the very thoughtful presentation. Do the commissioners have any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Batten.
On number 39 on the proposal here, could you walk me through, at the bottom you've listed 5 studios, the current rent $925. So could you walk me through I'm not sure I understand what these numbers mean.
Oh, so in the current rents right now are $925 for in-place tenants, and we're keeping those rents, and then new studios will be rented out at that 80% rent level, which is $2,050.
So, for example, the studio will go up from $925.
Well,
$2,048
for new households, yes.
for new households.
Yes. Not for existing households.
Existing households remain at the same rent.
Yeah, with the 4% increase. Yes.
Okay, but new people coming in will have quite an increase. More than double.
And that's at 80% affordable rent levels, and it's still significantly below market rate.
And people that are presently living there, that, for example, in this, say that living in a studio, they will continue to pay $925 with the possibility of a 4% increase each year.
Yes, that is correct, ma'am.
Okay. Then if I could follow up on that question. I know that your primary concern is not dislocating people, but so everybody that's there already remains at the same rent. They don't go up. Is that correct?
Yes.
My understanding.
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay, so that avoids them being priced out of those homes.
Yes, that is correct, yep.
Okay. All right, that was my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Batten. Anyone else? Commissioner Solomon,
Yes,
please.
Thank you. I have a question about, given the year in which the complex was built, I'm wondering if there are soft structures, and if there are, if the structural upgrades will include any earthquake retrofitting.
So this building does not have, it's not a soft structure building, so, yep. But in our due diligence prior to acquisition, we have done structural testing, and we're comfortable with our plan moving forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Lin? I thought I saw you reaching for your light.
I did. I think Commissioner Batten was sort of edging on. If we go back to one of your slides, slide 9, you mentioned that I think it said that there are currently tenants who are, it's okay, who are above low income. Do you know about the ratio of low income versus above low income, or how are you categorizing that?
Oh, at what AMI level?
That's not what the slide said. I just wanted clarification on, I think it was 9. One down. Over the low income requirement.
Yeah. Yeah. In that, I'm considering low income at the 80% level.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then over.
And then the over. Yeah, the over. I think there's. I don't know off the top of my head, but I think one's around 80 to 90%. I think 2 of the folks households are in that range, and there's one in the 110 to 120 range.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. While I know this funding request is only for the acquisition of the property, I was wondering if you could tell us about some of the improvements that are planned on the property that would extend the life of the property, improve the sustainability. What other kind of improvements? Because a lot of those type of improvements also help save tenants money in the long run.
Yeah, so after Bridge does acquire the building, we have a pretty extensive rehab plan that we have in place. This includes some structural improvements to decks, to the roof, Energy Star appliances throughout, new windows, and new AC and PTAC units. So,
Is there an estimate for how many years it would extend the life of the property?
I mean, the roof's going to have a warranty. We're budgeting replacement reserves throughout. I would say, I don't know, 30 years. I don't know. Yeah, it's enough for us, our lender, to be comfortable. So.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I'm just out of curiosity, I know you have the several different unit types in the building from the studios on up. Which ones tend to have the longer waiting lists? Or do you have waiting lists in this complex? Do you know?
So we haven't acquired
Right, but
the
do you
building
happen
yet.
to know which?
Out of the unit types? No, would staff know based on?
Generally, overall, with our affordable housing stock, 1s and 2s are actually,
Family-sized?
Yes.
Right.
quite popular or in higher demand than studios, if you will. So.
Great. Food for thought. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the commissioners? Otherwise,
Yes.
Commissioner Batten, go ahead. You have great questions.
Thank you. So do you know if you currently have any vacancies?
So I believe there are 4 vacancies right now.
Okay, so you intend to
Yes, and intend to
put
rent
them
those
at the
80%
higher
levels.
rate?
Yes.
Okay. And then the last question I had, I think, so far is, you've got, you still need another about $200,000 in funding in order to complete the project. Does it seem as though that's likely that you'll be able to raise that amount of money? That's on the, when it says proposed project revenues, you say that you have financing for about 18 million.
Yes, yeah.
And you have a little bit remaining. It's only 200,000, but do you have a?
Yeah, that 200,000 I think is bridge equity, our capital that we'd be putting in.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the commissioners? Well, thank you very much. Are there any public comments on this presentation? Seeing none, actually, since we're going to discuss these one by one and come to a conclusion, is that correct, staff?
That's correct. So you can, if you can have discussion and then move to a vote to, on the recommendation, or if the commission has other recommendations they'd like to put forward.
Great. Commissioners, does anyone want to start the dialogue on this project?
Concern that I have is that at some point the rents are going to be increased as people tend to move out. And so it will become less of a low-income project as people move out and new people move in, paying the higher rent. That's the only concern that I had. But they will still be at below market, is that correct?
Yes.
Even when they're paying the higher rent?
Yes, yeah, that's correct. It'll be deed restricted at 80% rents, or 80% AMI rents, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments as we continue the discussion? Well, I would like to just say, I think this project really does meet many of the city's current goals in terms of preserving affordable housing, about preserving our diversity and community for all, and as well with some of the appliances and window upgrades, improving sustainability. So I think overall, it's a really solid project that we need very much.
I tend to agree, and thank you very much for giving us this possibility.
I agree as well. Thank you.
I am not going to be the only one who doesn't agree, so I also agree.
You can be.
I recognize that.
Not that I don't like a great discussion, but I'm sensing that we are coming to a point very quickly. Would anybody like to make a motion? The motion would need to be framed as approving the request, the dollars you would like to see it approved at, and for whom. And in this case, of course, it's just Bridge Housing. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I make a motion that we fund Bridge Housing Development on Mariposa for the full amount requested, $980,000.
Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
Great, thank you. Do we need a roll call vote or just?
Yes, you can do roll call vote, please.
Great. Commissioner Batten.
Yes, aye.
Commissioner Solomon.
Aye.
Commissioner Lynn.
Aye.
And Chair Sylvester, yes. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck with the project. We'll look forward to hearing what comes of it.
Yes.
For sure. Thank you. Okay. Moving right along, the next presentation will be from Maura. Oops, sorry, I forgot Fernando. Very bad of me, thank you. I knew somebody was missing. Welcome back. Don't let them tell you I almost forgot you. Not for long. Next up, we will hear from the applicant for the City of Mountain View Public Works Department on Mora Ortega Park. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Good evening, commissioners.
Evening.
My name is, good evening. My name is Mary Chris Gabon. I'm with the Public Works Department, and I'm here to, oh, sorry, it's actually not up yet.
Great.
Sorry about the delay.
No problem.
All right, well, again, good evening. My name is Mary Chris Gabon. I'm with the Public Works Department of the City of Mountain View, and I'm here to present Mora Park project, Mora Park being the actually official and selected, City Council selected name for the park. So this project proposes a future park along Ortega and Mora, as shown in the highlighted blue square on the map there. The 0.45 acre land was dedicated to the city by the developers of the nearby townhome development for the intent of constructing a new neighborhood park. The site is located in a low to moderate income census group, and it is anticipated that 53.27% of the total number of Mountain View residents served will be from the low to moderate income population. By building this park, the city will make progress towards meeting some of our objectives. One goal from the Parks and Open Space Plan, which is to provide 3 acres of open space per 1,000 residents. Mora Park is located in the San Antonio planning area, which currently has a standard of 1.34 acres per 1,000 residents. And so once the park is constructed, this standard will increase to 1.37 acres of open space available per 1,000 residents. This project will also meet the consolidated plan goal of improving community and public facilities, as Orlando had previously mentioned, by providing a neighborhood park where the community can enjoy a play area with structures and open space. So the concept for the future park is shown here, and it was prepared based on community input that city staff obtained by holding community meetings. The concept was presented to the Parks and Recreation Commission for recommendation, and then later presented to City Council for approval. And so, as shown is what the City Council approved. The concept proposes a lawn area made of natural turf, a play area with play equipment and structures, a small fitness area, and a shaded courtyard that has picnic benches, and all of this is surrounded by a meandering loop trail. And in the community meeting, the residents also showed interest in giving the park an orchard theme, and so that explains the plenty of trees kind of meandering through the walkway to give it sort of a nice shade, but also orchard theme-like. And the park will also be fenced. There'll actually be a short perimeter fence facing Ortega Avenue and Mora. And the park will, of course, provide standard park amenities such as benches, bike racks, and a drinking fountain. And these images just show examples of the play equipment being proposed for the park. And these are also like the circular mounds are kind of just colorful turf areas for the kids to kind of roll on, give them the feeling of rolling on hills almost. So with this project, we are estimating about 40% of the project cost going towards green upgrades. These green upgrades for this project include selecting site furnishings made of recycled material, installing bioswales for on-site drainage, having a large lawn area made of natural turf, installing smart controller that will contribute towards water savings for irrigation, planting low water use plants, and planting plenty of trees for reducing the carbon footprint and reducing heat island effect. The current project budget is approximately $1.665 million. We are requesting $750,000 of the CDBG funds available. CDBG, sorry. With the prices for contractors and materials constantly rising, the designers have increased the estimated project cost. We also anticipate an increase in cost as we refine the design to address staff recommended changes and constructability concerns. Oh, sorry. And this is just the schedule of where we're at. We're currently at 95% design. And thank Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for the very detailed presentation. Would the members of the commission like to ask the applicant any questions? Commissioner Batten, please.
Yes. It's unusual for us, I believe, to have something coming straight from the city. So how, if you know, how is funding usually, how are these projects normally funded when they are a city project?
They are funded similar to any other subrecipient. They will incur costs and they can submit an invoice to the city, another department, if you will, and then we will reimburse them and then get reimbursed through HUD.
But in this case, the city can't pay the whole thing, is that? The whole cost of it is $1.6 million to do it, and we're asked to fund a portion of that, $750,000. And that's something that the city is not going to, well, I guess we will through HUD, but why are we being asked to fund part of it?
So I'd like to chime in that the $1.665 million does cover the entire project, so not just the construction. It includes staff time, the design consultant that we have on board, administration. So the, yes, the 1.665 doesn't only mean that the construction will be $1.665 million. So additional funding will just help towards, kind of just helping towards adding any park amenities that may have been increased in cost construction-wise, or even adding a couple more elements that we would want to provide the neighborhood, but we, with the construction rising costs, it's a little hard to provide. One example being for traffic improvements. We would like to work on some sort of crossing, but with the current.
I understand the need, but I was just concerned about where the funding would be coming normally through the city when we develop parks. And I don't know if you know that, so excuse me if for asking a question you don't know.
Good evening, Joy Houghton, Associate Engineer in Public Works Department.
Thank you.
This is a capital improvement park project, and it's funded through different funding sources. This one in particular is funded through our Parkland Fund. The project budget is 1.6, but we are anticipating, we are only at 95% right now in design, and we are still refining the cost of the whole project, and we are anticipating a shortfall at this time. And so the requested funds will be used towards that.
It appears that the developer dedicated the space, but not the funds to develop.
Funds.
Actually, just a quick question about what you said. Is the shortfall about the same as the grant, or?
We are still refining that right now. Like I mentioned, we're only at 95%. As we progress into the design, we'll find out more. And there's currently a park under construction, and it's having some issues that we're hoping we can address during design for this one. So the numbers are still being refined at this moment.
Okay, thank you.
If I might add in on that, obviously the city develops and parks all the time. Actually, that's maybe not obvious because Mountain View, I think, is very fortunate the degree to which we are able to add parks and open space in the community. It's a very proactive strategy around that. And for each project, the potential funding sources are assessed, and many, if not most of them, would not qualify for use of CDBG funds. But this park in this location, given the population that it will serve, does qualify. And so each project, on a project-by-project basis, does look at what are the available funding sources to try to maximize being able to deliver and bring these parks to the community. So not having to use more parkland fee funds means that those funds will be available for other parks that wouldn't be able to qualify for use of these CDBG funds.
Thank you for that explanation.
Thank you, Audrey, that explains it.
I have a question.
Commissioner Lynn?
Oh, excuse me. I have a question about, so you said you're about was it 95, 90%, something like that, very close. So what exactly is the, let's say at this point you don't reach, say, 100% or go over 100%, what will be the outcome of the park? Do you just develop part of it, or do you, like, what exactly gets actually developed and constructed?
Don't get the requested funds. What we can do is go back to council and recommend to appropriate additional funding so that we can construct the park being designed.
Say if you don't get that, just let's say, like, forever on from here on out, as a hypothetical, you only ever get like 95 or 98% of what is required. So if you can never, I don't want to be pessimistic here, but if you can never receive all the funds that are required, since it's an unknown right now, what is the proposed outcome? Like, are there cuts to this design, or do you anticipate, I don't know, like fewer trees, or that's what I'm asking?
Let me have the project manager.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, something along those lines. Usually when we put out the projects to bid, if we anticipate that the available funds aren't sufficient, we may put items as a bid alternate, meaning we'll have the contractors give us a price, but it gives us the chance to say, if we can't, you know, we can't either ask council for the additional funding to fund those items of construction items, then we don't have to have the contractor perform that sort of work.
Okay. Do you have that sort of contingency plan in place right now, or is that like a cross that bridge when you get there sort of thing?
Yeah, I think we would have to analyze the items of bid work and kind of evaluate which ones are top priority, which ones may be able to be cut off. Some of it may be, you know, like not making the pathways concrete instead of a cheaper material like decomposed granite or something.
Okay.
That's an example.
Yeah, because I see the function of this park as like a couple of things. There's the environmental component, the children's play component, the I don't know that much about parks or design, but it seems like it's serving a lot of different types of residents and folks in Mountain View. So is there sort of a hierarchy almost, or like a prioritization of which of those like subpopulations you'd hold over another?
I don't believe we would remove any of the furnishings that, how do I say, service one group over the other. I think our priority would be to have those installed. It would just be more of like the landscaping that might be affected, or like choice of material for other, I don't know how to say it, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, thank you, yeah, that's helpful.
Just to follow up on that question, to be sure I understand, you need another $915,000, right, to complete the project. If we funded $750,000, the difference between the entire cost of the entire project and what we would fund would be about $900,000. Have you a commitment from the city or from other funders to cover that? And I think that's to follow up on what was asked.
Sorry, can you give me a little bit more background of the number?
I think she's asking for how the amount not funded through CDBG is funded. The city has committed that funding. The city has committed the funding for the amount that's not covered by CDBG. Welcome.
Fernando.
Just have a question about the demographics of that this park is gonna serve. You say, is it medium income, lower income, or upper income, the demographic, about the population?
The census block groups in that area are considered low to moderate income, that being 80% of AMI or less. And this, the requirement for CDBG is that the area must exceed 51%.
All right.
And this area exceeds it at 53 and change.
Okay. So, just a follow-up. So we have a lot of big companies, tech companies here in Mountain View. Do we get any funding from them to build parks? Or, I don't know.
Not this particular project.
We do have developer impact fees and in particular contribution to Parkland as part of approving developers. And so that's the fund that staff referenced that is one of the primary sources for funding purchase of land and construction of parks.
Thank you.
Following along to something Fernando mentioned, while the area is in a census block that's 80% AMI or less than 80% AMI, the area immediately around this park seems to be potentially higher income. Like this particular park is built because some older housing got torn out and is being replaced with some pretty upscale looking housing. So the immediate area around this park looks like it has a lot of brand new upscale development, or at least market rate development. How will this park stay accessible to people who might be several blocks away in the current AMI condition?
So the analysis that was done on this park consisted of 4 block groups. Of those 4 block groups, 3 of them would primarily use it. The analysis behind that is the property is bordered by Central Expressway to the north, which includes 3 lanes plus the Caltrains, which divides. So then it's anticipated that the residents would be the ones immediately surrounding that block group block group 2, where the park resides. Block group 3 and 4, they do consist of some larger communities. However, in terms of open space, there isn't anything around there. Block group 4 consists of primarily commercial businesses. There are, I think I counted a total of 5 residential apartment buildings that would benefit from use of this property, aside from the newer adjacent community that was recently built. So again, that's just to reflect that from the analysis done, there are apartment complexes scattered throughout 3 of those block groups that would benefit from the park. The one that is excluded from this review, but is in that radius, is block group 1. And the reason for that is that block group number 1 consists of 2 planned communities, of which they have already tot lots and HOA-supported open space areas. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Sorry.
Oh, yes, please.
All right, my name is Ray Rodriguez. I'm Senior Project Manager in Public Works. I work with Mary Chris. At the community meetings that we held, we had a lot of attendees from outside of that development. So there was a lot of interest from the residents in that area that came to our meetings to help plan the park. So just another metrics for you.
It's great to hear. Thank you. Any other questions from the commissioners? Going once. Do any members of the public wish to speak on this? Hearing no public comment, the public hearing part of this is closed, and the commissioners will start a discussion on the item. Would anyone like to kick it off? Commissioner
My
Batten?
feeling is it's extremely valuable to have the park, particularly in this area. So having understood how the funding works now, I'm very much in favor of continuing to fund it, or funding it.
Thank you.
I'm very much in favor of being able to use less traditional sources of funding for parks, so that other funding can be used for other sources, and in particular that there's, surprisingly this year, there's not a competition for the funds. In other words, we don't have more requests for funds than we have funds available. So I'm very much in favor of this.
Commissioner Romero?
Yeah, I'm in favor of honoring the staff recommendations, and I think this the park adds community value, so I'm in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for myself, I really like the design of this park. I like the combination of uses, including the playground, the fitness, and the orchards are a really cool touch. So it's very, very thoughtful design, and I like to see a new development with such, an area with new development have such a large park being established, because you can't build them later. So thank you very much. Furthering other comments from the commission and further discussion?
I just have one question. What are the on another screen, you talked about bio something, and I wondered what those.
Oh, bioswales. They are just, how do I say it? They are.
The colored.
Oh, they're actually just landscaped areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
To help, instead of, having a drain limit, the rain will just drain to landscape areas.
Okay.
Other comments or questions before I ask for a motion? Oh, no problem. Ask away. Well, I'm starting to hear some significant agreement. Do I have a motion? The motion would be to approve the project in the amount requested by the City of Mountain View Public Works Department for Mora Park, I guess is the right name. Do I have a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion. I move that we approve the requested amount of $750,000 for the Mora Ortega Park project of the City of Mountain View.
I second that.
Great. I guess we will take a roll call vote. Commissioner Romero?
In favor.
Commissioner Batten?
Aye.
Commissioner Solomon?
Aye.
Commissioner Lynn?
Aye.
And Chair Sylvester? Aye. And it passes. Thank you very much, and good luck with the park.
Thank you very much, too.
Yes. Next up, we have Life Moves and their request for $12,000 for graduate house repairs and rehabilitation. Oh, there's.
That is correct. Sorry, I don't have a fancy presentation for you, but
That's okay.
I'll be able to answer all your questions. So first and foremost, good evening, commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to present this evening, and thank you for staff for your due diligence in reviewing our application. My name is Joanne Price. I'm Vice President of Real Estate with Life Moves. I'm here with my colleague Samantha House, who's project manager for this particular project. I'm going to give you a quick overview of Life Moves if you're not familiar with us, how we serve Mountain View residents, not only in the project that we're asking for the $12,000, but also in some of our other facilities. And then I'll give you a quick overview on the project itself. So Life Moves, we're an organization that's been going 40 years. We're the largest service provider of homeless shelter and services in Silicon Valley. On one night, we have 950 beds. 1/3 of those beds are taken by children and about 1/5 for veterans. We have 20 facilities between Daly City, and South San Jose. Our mission is to provide interim housing and supportive services for homeless families and individuals to return them to stable housing rapidly and self-sufficient. So we have a substantial and successful history of providing services to residents of Mountain View who are experiencing homelessness. Graduate House provides traditional housing for clients who have been homeless, who are chronically homeless, and they are 100% low income. We have a total of 6 rooms, and 4 rooms are specifically reserved for Mountain View residents, but typically all units are taken by the residents. And we would serve in 1 year about 10 Mountain View residents. The average length of stay is about 99 to 129 days. That length of stay is extending because we haven't got the affordable housing to help house these people. The transitional housing, the people who have been at Graduate House would otherwise be sleeping in the streets, in vehicles, or in other uninhabitable places like garages or on like couch surfing. In terms of the numbers, in Graduate House alone, that number of 10 residents equates to about $200,000 to $250,000 per year. But not only that, we serve a number of Mountain View residents at our other facilities, and that averages about 28 clients in the past 2 years. And that comes to a total of 4,273 nights of stay. We have the data to support this. We track all our clients coming into the facility. That equates to about $300,000. And we do not request funding through Mountain View in terms of services. So it's great that we get this capital request to help bolster Graduate House. So quick summary of the application. About 2 years ago, we applied for about $58,000 to update the kitchen. And when you think of the average age for single clients now at shelters, just exceeded 50. And with that comes the challenges of mobility and accessibility. So that's what this money was put for, to remodel the kitchen. And Sam has done a wonderful job in working with the designers to get kitchen where we can get wheelchairs round, lower the countertops so they're ADA compliant. We're switching out the appliances so they're Energy Star. And we're also changing a couple of windows to Title 24 compliancy along with the lighting. So it's a really valuable use of the money. When we went through the process back in 2018, under the California Labor Code 1720, homeless shelters are exempt from prevailing wage, but it was since determined when the contract was signed it does apply to HUD projects. So we kindly request this $12,000 to cover the uptick in the labor costs so we can complete the project. We're ready to go. The contractor is ready to go. So once we get the contract signed, we'll get this job done within a couple of months. So we kindly thank you for your time and your consideration of these funds.
Thank you very much, Life Moves. You do incredibly valuable work in our community, so thank you for sharing a little bit more about the impact you make. That was very nice to hear, although, well, nice. It's a lot of numbers per night, so thank you for doing the hard work. Do the commissioners have questions for this applicant?
I just have one question. Also, I want to thank you for the wonderful work that you do. So you weren't able to complete the work last year. Is that correct? Was that because of the increase in the funding? Or I think there's something in here about the lack of contractors or something. Was that the issue?
There was, at first it was hard to find the small contractor able to undertake this work. And at the same time, we were seeking clarification about the prevailing wage because we had this contradictory information from the California Labor Code, which we're very familiar with. And we were needed like the guidance from the city. And once that was verified, it just pushed us back. And so then once we wanted to make sure we were on the correct side of the requirements before we signed the contract. So everything is ready, like the design, the contractors lined up. We've chosen all our green green finishes, we got like sustainable bamboo cabinets, etc. So all that is ready. And we're just waiting for the labor, the additional money to cover the labor.
Other questions?
Are the renovations that you're talking about, are they only for the sort of the communal space in the graduate housing, or are there also like adjustments to the individual rooms, or?
Primarily, it's just the kitchen, it's the communal kitchen dining area.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I'm sorry, yes? Oh, no. I think actually my questions have been asked, so thank you for all the clarification. With that said, does any member of the public, they're dwindling, do any of you have
Excuse me, Chair.
comments you would like to make?
Excuse me, I think you have one more commissioner question.
Oh, was there a light on?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Well, thank you for the work that you guys are doing for our community. So my question is, if you guys don't get the 12,000, I mean, I don't want to be pessimistic, well, but what will you guys do? Do you guys have other sourcing of funding, or pretty much relying on these 12,000 to get the work moving?
We really would like to go ahead with this work. Typically, our funding comes through 60% public, 40% donors, and typically the donor funds want to go to direct services, is paying for like the case managers and directly interacting with the clients. So the capital projects kind of get pushed down the line, which is great. When we got the opportunity for funding, that it was like, yes, we can do this work, because typically it kind of, the support services take priority than capital projects, which, whilst much needed, it's those direct support services that are the priority, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Actually, I do have a question. Again, encouraged by Commissioner Romero. Do you have any other capital projects planned in the area for shelter space?
In Mountain View, no. Graduate House is the only shelter we operate. Although we do, like when I was talking about our other facilities from Daly City to San Jose, we do have clients from Mountain View that Montgomery Street, Julian Street, Villa, and we do have capital projects at those locations, but they're in a different jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you. So back to public comment. Are there any public comments on this item? The pressure is on. Sorry, members of the public. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and the HRC commissioners will discuss. Would anyone like to kick off this discussion?
I appreciate the challenges of getting funding for capital projects when donors want their money to go directly for services. So I think this is a great opportunity to be able to provide that additional capital funding for an organization that's really playing a crucial role for homeless individuals in this city.
Seeing no further discussion and what I believe is agreement, would someone like to make a motion?
I will make a motion. Oh. Sorry. I will make a motion that we approve the entire $12,000 that was requested for repairs and rehabilitation of Graduate House.
I will second that motion. Roll call vote. Commissioner Romero.
Aye.
Commissioner Batten.
Aye.
Commissioner Solomon.
Aye.
Commissioner Lynn.
Aye.
And Chair Sylvester. Aye, all the way. Thank you very much. This concludes item 6.1, so thank you all.
And
Thank you
for
so
your continued
much.
support.
Thank you.
Okay. I hope everyone feels really, really good. This is some of the most fun work we get to do and most impactful. So, deep breath. Moving on to item 6.2. Review and provide review and provide input on recommended draft 2020-2025 consolidated plan goals. The HRC will hold a public hearing now to review, discuss, and provide input on the recommended draft goals for the 2020-25 consolidated plan for City Council consideration. Community Development, Neighborhoods and Housing Division, Housing and Neighborhood Services Manager Tim Wong, and Senior Planner Orlando Reyes Rodas will lead the discussion and provide direction on the public hearing protocols and requirements. Thank you once again. It's great to have you here tonight.
Thank you, Commissioners. The presentation is now up. Tonight we'll be reviewing the draft fiscal year 2020 to 2025 consolidated plan. I'm sure you enjoyed reading the 200-plus pages, I believe it was.
I did.
Did you? Yes.
The current consolidated plan, which was from 2015 through 2020, will expire on June 30th, 2020. This new consolidated plan, which you have reviewed, will cover July 1st of this year through June 30, 2025. The federal documents that are contained as part of the consolidated plan is the 5-year strategy within the consolidated plan. Within the consolidated plan, we use it to identify the community needs for housing market assessment, community development needs, and for the populations which are underserved. As part of the consolidated plan, there is the annual action plan, which identifies the activities which align with the consolidated plan goals. Those activities must be consistent with the goals found in the consolidated plan. As previously mentioned in the earlier presentation, there is also the CAPERS, which is part of the federal documents. That is the report for the prior fiscal year. Every year we have to do this CAPERS report. The consolidated plan update process consists of both qualitative and quantitative data gathering that was found in the report. One of them is called the CHAS, or the Comprehensive Housing Affordability Strategy. That's where some of the data comes from. The other is the ACS, or American Community Survey, which is the survey, the most current survey. There is a 2020 census that will be happening, but for now, the data points used are the last census. We also use a placed in time data point for 2019. So that's the quantitative and qualitative data that builds the consolidated plan. The other aspect of it is the community outreach. From the community outreach, there's essentially 3 components that took place. One was partnering with the county of Santa Clara and other local jurisdictions in outreach. That consisted of 3 regional forums that were conducted throughout the county, and 2 community forums that happened locally here in the city of Mountain View. In addition, there was a online survey that was made available, of which 184 city respondents, on which 184 city residents responded to it. The survey was made available in multiple languages, as was the 2 community forums that were held. One of them was in Spanish, and we, I believe we also provided the presentations in different languages in addition to Spanish. So with the data collected, the community can strategically target the federal funds by creating these goals and priorities. The consolidated plan identified some needs. Here are just a few examples on the screen, which include the city has the 4th largest homeless population in the county. Many households are housing cost burdened, especially those in the low to moderate income households, 80% of AMI or less. Over half of the elderly households in the city of Mountain View are LMI or low to moderate income. Black and African American and Asian American households experience a higher disproportionate of housing problems. And then the other was that certain Hispanic and Asian American households experience severe housing problems. Again, these are just a few examples that are in the con plan. I think there are maybe a dozen or so more in identified needs. The first question for the HRC to consider is whether those identified needs, as detailed in the needs assessment portion of the consolidated plan, whether you agree with them. The other is if there are any additional needs that the HRC would like to identify that are not found in the plan as shared by the community and through the outreach means. The goals that were developed both from the qualitative and quantitative and the community or citizen participation are identified in front of you. That includes establishing homeless prevention service programs, responding to lack of housing for homeless, creating sustainable jobs and increasing earnings capacity, and addressing and promoting fair housing. In the earlier presentation, you would have seen these same goals and how the activities or applications presented, how they aligned with these current goals found in the 20 to 2025 consolidated plan. HUD doesn't require us to prioritize these goals, so these bullet points are in no order of priority or ranking. Question 2 is whether the HRC agrees with the proposed consolidated plan goals and whether there are any other additional goals you'd like to recommend. The affirmatively furthering fair housing, or AFH, is the next step which will be brought to the HRC for review. We did separate that from the consolidated plan just because of the volume for you to review. The AFH is designed to identify fair housing issues and determine factors that significantly contribute to those issues. It requires the city to proactively reach out to those identified as unrepresented groups, and that's the draft that you will be receiving for review and for a conversation on April 2nd. Some of the key dates, March 13th through April 14th is when the 30-day public commenting period begins for the consolidated plan, the plan that you have had a chance to review. The AFH will again be shared following this meeting for us to reconvene on April 2nd and discuss. On April 28th is when the City Council is to consider both the approval of the con plan and the capital project fundings activities that you reviewed today. With the culmination that on May 15th, all the government docs, the con plan, the AFH, and the annual action plan are due to HUD. And that concludes the consolidated plan presentation.
Thank you very much. I really look forward to this discussion. But first, we have questions for staff from the HRC.
One of the questions I have, let me find it here, had to do with the various data points where you're getting information. And one of them, under methodology, the second paragraph talks about the AMI, meaning area median family income. What is the area that they're referring to? How does that drill down? Because if you talk about the whole Bay Area, it's quite different depending on where you live. So I'm wondering what the area is composed of.
The AMFI is for Santa Clara County, same as state HCD, and HUD also uses Santa Clara County as the,
I was referring to the AMI. Is that what you were, is that what you're also referring to?
correct. The
Okay.
AMI is area median income.
Okay, and that's the entire Bay Area? Or
For Santa Clara County.
Santa Clara County?
We do not have a AMI specifically for the city of Mountain View.
That is-
All the jurisdictions in the county use the county AMI.
Okay.
Other questions?
I have a clarification question just about our task here, and I don't mean to I don't like to use a violent metaphor, jump the barrier on that. But I want to understand if you posed some questions to us. They were in the slide set, and we were aware of those. I'm wondering if beyond that, are you looking for other feedback on the report, if there were parts of that weren't clear or other comments, or are we restricted to addressing the questions that you've posed to us?
Absolutely all comments. We are most interested in the HRC's feedback in regards to the needs and goals of the con plan, because that is really the meat of the document. However, if you do see some discrepancies or something that is missing, for example, we'll be certainly happy to take a note of that. And as one of the parts of the con plan, HUD requires that we look at all comments that are received and how we address them. So certainly available to receive any overall comments in addition to your feedback on needs and goals.
Other questions or comments for staff?
Just a question on process. Are we now getting into answering the questions that were placed to us, or is this more general?
Not yet. When we are done with comments and public comment, if there is any, we will go item by item, first through the items under question 1 and then through items in question number 2. Other comments from commissioners or questions for staff? Seeing none, do any members of the public wish to comment on this item? Oh, yes, please. Great.
Hi, Joanne with Light Moves again. On some of the numbers that you reported, it was stated that Mountain View is actually the city with the 4th largest homeless population. But when you actually read the point in time count, Mountain View is actually second when it comes to unsheltered populations in Mountain View. When it comes to sheltered, yes, they are 4th, but the numbers are substantially higher when you look at the unsheltered numbers. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Other members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Okay, we'll close public hearing on the item, and thank you for the comment on the homeless count. So staff, just checking in with you. My understanding is we should, under question 1, under the goals, go one by one and have the commissioners comment and question, make any comments on each one, and agree or disagree. And then at the end of going through the established bullet points, see if anybody would like to add any. Are we okay with that methodology?
That's fine.
Okay, I don't think this will be too tedious, but the way I said it made it sound terrible. So we will amend as needed if it gets terrible. So can we put the slide up with, I guess it's, I don't know what slide it is. This one, yes. So for question 1, we must identify, do we agree with it, or do we identify with the needs as detailed in the needs assessment and from community input? And that's the list up on the screen. And are there any additional needs the HRC would like to identify? So Actually, quick question for staff. I thought that you wanted us to go through the bullet items under goals that would be in the slides?
That is question number 2. So
But
we're going to
there's-
start with the needs, which are, these are the identified needs. These are some of the summary of needs that have been identified in the needs assessment. However, in the con plan, there are a number of needs that have been identified, but we didn't want to list them all. So this is.
Yeah, we definitely have to prioritize. So I will go through these one by one. I won't take a roll call vote unless we seem to have disagreement. So the first bullet, the city has the 4th largest homeless population in the county. I'll go ahead and comment based on public input that second is probably the more correct. Looking at the point in time count is probably the more correct way to look at that.
We could add that to it, because
Well-
it is true that it's the 4th largest homeless.
True, but
Because some of the people are in shelters.
Is there a specific way that through the consolidated plan data process that we are supposed to measure that statistic?
No, that was just drawing from the point in time. It's very nuanced where, yes, this was just more highlighting the fact that we are, in terms of overall population, shelter and unsheltered in the city of Mountain View. But we can clarify as part of the consolidated plan, we have the 2nd largest unsheltered population.
Or make just the general point that it's a significant issue for the city of Mountain
Absolutely.
View.
Mhm.
I personally would like that clarification, so. Any other comments?
I agree. I think it would be helpful to clarify that.
I think we are agreeing with enthusiasm unless anyone has any other comments on the first item. I'm moving on to the next. And I guess we could always jump back if someone comes up with something. The second point, many households are housing cost burdened, especially the low moderate LMI households.
I do have a question. If you don't have room, if there are no funds for you to pay rent, the cost, how would you describe cost burdened as opposed to homeless? Are you saying that even people that are housed are cost burdened, even if they can afford the rent, or I'm not sure what that means.
Cost burden, there are 2 definitions. Cost burden is those who spend more than 30% of their household income on housing, which is generally the federal government standard. And just to explain, when we say severe cost burden, that is 50%. They spend more than half their household income on housing.
Is that net or gross?
Everything is gross, using annual gross income.
Other comments or questions on this bullet point? Did you want to add anything, Commissioner Patton?
No, thank you.
Great. Next, over half of the elderly households are LMI. I would like to comment a bit on this one. Based on the public feedback, so from the surveys and from the forum I went to and the summary of that forum, I think there's a lot of concern about the elderly in general, not just that many households are LMI, and I think it's actually well over half, right, 65%. There's a lot of concerns about other needs and services for seniors, that the senior population has become somewhat invisible, and it's growing. So I don't know if we can expand that bullet to include that the elderly population's service needs as a whole need to be looked at, not just affordable housing. Legal services, healthcare, home care, accessibility and other issues, transportation. I know there's a whole host of issues as the baby boomers age up.
Okay, at that point, we can enforce, based on this comment, we can look at those other needs that help support that comment.
Great, thank you. It's just a population that I'm very concerned about after what I've read. A lot of the work that you've shared with us is very informative. Other comments from commissioners? Next point. Black, African American, and Asian American households experience a higher disproportion of housing problems.
I do have a question. Asian American is very broad. Is there, I mean, can you drill down at all about what sort of nationality? Is it mostly Chinese, Japanese, Thai? You know, I mean, can we get more information? Because I was wondering if you would include Indian.
That I would have to look into. You can, these estimates, because I will say, just backing up, these identified needs, again, are more summary. There's more quantitative analysis in the needs assessment. Okay. And in regards to those are based on the census. The census itself is, I believe, when it talks about Asians, it does have that ethnic breakdown. Okay. But when it comes to ACS data and CHAS data, which the con plan, which the needs assessment were built in, does not drill down as specific or granular as the 2010 census, what these numbers are based on. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
It does make sense that it's just a very broad category, and you don't get a real feel for what communities are really most affected.
But as a follow-up, we can also respond to see, I'm pretty sure they are, but Indians or Pakistanis, how they are folded in or categorized as Asian Americans. I'm pretty sure they are.
Thank you. Great question.
I have a question. I'm actually, if I may step back a little bit, I'm somewhat confused because the consolidated plan document itself has a list of things called priority needs, and that list doesn't match this list. And I just want to be sure I understand. I thought we were going to be talking about the priority needs as listed starting on page 117. And so starting on page 117, there's a statement of the priority needs as tied to the goals. And there's a lengthy table, and it has 9 priority needs. And what we're looking at on the screen is a very different looking set of needs. I mean, they're all related to each other. And the identified needs on the screen are definitely things that I saw in the report, but I'm just trying to understand why we're talking about this list of identified needs, which is not the list of priority needs as outlined in the report. So I'm not clear as to why these identified needs items were chosen out of, many things that could be chosen, and what will be done with this list as opposed to the list of priority needs. So if someone could clarify that would be helpful.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
So just to point out, these identified needs were staff just picking out, just to summarize, these are some of the identified needs that were produced in the executive summary, so we want to just highlight some of those. But absolutely, these identified needs or these priority needs, if the HRC would like to comment on, would like to go through these priority needs and see if you agree with their assessments. For example, increase affordable housing as a priority need. Right now, we have it categorized as, I believe, a very high priority, or housing near transit. We have that as a medium priority. If that's something that the HRC would also like to weigh in on and say, well, as this draft says, housing opportunities near transit is not a medium, it's a high. Then we can take those comments back in our review also. But sorry, not to cut, these slides were just maybe to start the conversation and then get feedback from the HRC about any other needs in the needs assessment that you may want to ask about.
Okay, great, thank you. Just wanted to understand the relationship of the two lists, because I'm like, wait, my list of needs here doesn't match this list. Okay.
I recommend that we continue on the process. We only have, well, if we're done with this bullet, we only have one more after this. And then after that, I will open up for comment if anyone has anything that they would like to add, which could in fact come from the table starting on page 117, or their own reading or thoughts. And I think there will be some really good discussion in that section. So thank you, Chair, Commissioner Solomon. Old habits die hard. Did anyone else have any questions or comments on Black, African American, and Asian American households? ... Any more on this specific point? If not, moving along to the last formal point on this list, certain Hispanic and Asian American households experience severe housing problems. Thoughts or comments? Commissioner Lynn.
How are you distinguishing the fourth bullet point of housing problems versus the fifth, that's severe housing problems?
That goes back to if you go into the executive summary, it kind of teases it out more, but Black or African American households and Asian American households, I believe in different AMI levels. I believe in number 4, it refers to low income African American and Asian American households experience a higher disproportion of housing problems, which is those low income households spend more than 30%. Certain Hispanic and Asian American households, those are actually very low income households, very low being defined as earning less than 50% of the AMI, and they are the ones who spend more than 50% or have severe housing problems. So again, it was a summary, but that's the difference between those two bullet points.
Thank you for clarifying.
And another clarification, it says here certain, but I think is what's intended that higher proportions of Hispanic and Asian American households experience, or at least among a certain socioeconomic group, experience severe housing problems in contrast to other racial and ethnic groups.
That's true. It could have been worded, you could have said even very low income Hispanic and Asian American households
Are more likely to experience severe housing problems than
exactly.
other. Okay,
yes.
Great, got it. Thank you.
Commissioner Batten?
Oh, I left.
Oh, never mind.
But that's okay. I can add something.
Improv.
In that list that you talked about on page whatever,
117.
Yes. Did they talk anything about, was there any identification of mental health needs put in there, particularly for unhoused,
item
homeless?
Item 7 on page 119.
Okay, so when we get to goals, I think I would add something there, but we'll get to that.
Well, the goals and the needs are slightly different.
So the goals, I think, the needs would
Should
be.
okay, so-
Should include, I would question the fact that you're not seeing mental health issues on the needs of the identified needs. List.
Quick process step. I just want to make sure that we have completed certain Hispanic, anyone else want to comment on certain Hispanic and Asian American population? And then suggest a process for how we could go through unique identified needs that we all see. So I'm going to suggest that we each take turns, if we have any, identifying needs that we think should be on this list, and one by one, so say actually let's say Linda has an item, shares an item about mental health and explains whatever she wants to, then we can all discuss and then decide to agree if it should be added to the list.
Can I go back to the process? Sorry, But I'm still confused. If the item is on the priority needs list already, do we need to discuss it? I mean, if we all agree that it should be there. I guess I'm wondering which list is going to end up kind of going up and on to city council, et cetera. Is it the bullets we're seeing here, or is it the plan which has the priority needs?
Absolutely, it is the plan and
Okay.
all the language in the plan. So what I would suggest is I think going through the priority needs might answer a number of your questions. And so staff suggests absolutely going through the priority needs also, because those are, I think, covers many of your questions at this point.
Okay, so I will suggest an alternative that we all look at. I don't know if this was on the desk tonight, but page 117 of the consolidated plan, the giant book. Either that or I'll happily read
I
these
don't have
out.
the giant. Oh, maybe I do.
Okay. What I suggest is I will simply read them out. They're very, very short. They're short sentences. And I'll do the best to read them quickly, and we can decide if we agree or not, and then move on to the section of deciding if we want to add anything to these needs. Are we all in agreement?
Okay.
Okay, priority number 1, increase affordable housing, priority level high. I think it speaks for itself. The description is create housing solutions that include programs that increase homeownership, preserve diversity and inclusion, support creative rental opportunities, increase affordable rental units, support integrated housing solutions and plans, development of housing for special needs population, it keeps going, rehabilitation programs that reduce vacancies and deteriorating housing stock, and reducing development and construction costs. It is in of itself a very, very large item. So I don't expect that, I suppose we could either comment and say we think it's missing something, or we think it should deprioritize some of the components in there. My suggestion is, unless somebody has something they think is really, really missing or really shouldn't be included, that we should vote if we agree that it's a priority or not. Staff, what do you feel?
I agree with the chair. If this is a complete description, then by all means, we welcome your feedback, or if something is missing. But this
Right.
is, as mentioned, very comprehensive.
I have a feeling we might catch some of what is missing when we say, oh, I think mental health services should be pulled up and made a stronger priority. I think when we get to that part of the discussion, we might be able to tease that out without trying to figure this out word for each of these.
Yes, right.
I'm also a little concerned because not everybody has this document in front of them. So I don't want them, I think everybody does now.
Just read it.
Okay, do you remember every word I just said? So everybody, page 117, reading along. Did everybody agree with priority 1, of increase affordable housing and priority level high? I think those are the 2 key things to give feedback upon.
I can't believe you guys copied all that.
Just to let you know, we're bringing up the PDF version, so you
Great.
can also look on your screen.
Oh, okay, good.
I think, staff, would you like us to make a formal motion, or would you just like a show of hands if we agree or not?
A show of hands would be fine instead of a.
I think so too, but want to make sure that it works with the process. So for priority 1, increase affordable housing, priority level high, show of hands if you agree with this priority and its priority level. That looks unanimous. Priority 2, housing opportunities near transit, priority level medium. As you can see, create and provide housing near and adjacent to major transit routes, making transportation to education, healthcare, jobs, and shopping more convenient and efficient for families. Does anyone have any questions or comments or concerns to share with staff?
We're on number 2.
Yes.
Persons with disabilities or mental illness, those are, okay. Never
But
mind.
that's specific to their housing near transportation.
Oh, okay. Housing.
I was wondering, it says transit, but not public transit. So are you meaning like close to thoroughfares such as Central Expressway, or like you would need a car and that counts as close to transit? Or do you mean like public transit, like bus routes, train routes, things like that?
Just, it appears just transit. And because in reading the description, it talks about major transit routes, but
So that would include bus lines as well as trains. It isn't just that you can easily get your car to the street.
So but it is inclusive of like car-only transit ways, such as like the freeway or like
I think transit generally refers to alternatives to people driving in single occupancy vehicles.
Okay, okay.
Can we make a clarification to say public transit, just to make sure that that gets caught? It is pretty vague otherwise.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure thing. Any other comments or questions before we move on to voting?
Is this category 1 and 2 and, oh, never mind. I'm sorry.
Are you sure?
Yeah, well, they all have to, I'm just surprised that this raised to the level of medium. I didn't realize that. So this has to do with housing, that there's a priority need, medium need for housing near, not just housing, but housing near transit.
Right.
And these populations are the ones most in need of that.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well, that specifically near transit is less of a priority than just more affordable housing. Although, yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and vote. Do we all agree that on the city's priority, housing opportunities near transit, and that we should have that priority, and it should be priority level medium? If you disagree on half of it, I guess, holler. Like, that's unanimous. Oh, is he, hand looked up to me.
Kind of debating whether that's priority medium or I don't know, for me it's like medium and low priority. I think low income housing or has the highest priority for me.
I totally agree with you.
I noticed that, so nothing has a low priority of these 9
Yes.
items. They're all either medium or high. I just want to comment on that I kind of looked at it to see what was the range to get a sense of what might, how many categories are there, and there seemed to be only 2.
Yes.
So just wanted to put that out there.
It's a bit of a challenge, but I think when we get to the actual goals, I think those might be a little bit easier. This is like the preface for the goals. Fernando, do we need to, well, I think that was 4 or 5 of 5 of us saying yes. Well, yeah. I think we're okay. Priority need number 3, sustainable jobs and income equality priority high. So these would be jobs for extremely low income, or jobs and jobs training and programs for extremely low income people with disabilities, elderly, homeless, chronically homeless, veterans, families with kids, non-housing public facilities, and economic development as the population served.
I just have to ask a question. Later on, does it get into wage theft? I mean, should we
No.
put something in there?
It does not as written. And I don't remember seeing wage theft being written into any of the summary reports about this. We can certainly.
Well, does income equality isn't quite that fair income, fair wage practices, something like that?
Commissioner Batten, I think that might actually belong in this category. Okay. Especially if we call it out as something that's very, very important. It's one thing to be able to train people, but it's another to make sure they actually get their wages. So I think it's the yin to the yang. I'm just going to make a comment about my own thoughts on the priority level. I understand the need for jobs, but for me, for the report, I've found it a little bit difficult to understand what kind of jobs programs would be developed and how they would directly contribute to the populations mentioned here. And I also, while I feel it is extremely important and noble, I was concerned that issues around housing mattered more than this one. That was a personal take on me. I'd be very curious why staff rated it a high. And also if you could tell us a little bit more.
The reason for it being high is actually these are based on community feedback and through the survey, those type of things that when polled, you saw the survey in the back, that these were important or high priority needs for them. In regards to why jobs are being mentioned, for example, because CDBG does offer it's economic development for low-income households or low-income persons is a eligible activity.
Yes.
So for that reason, this was folded in as part of the survey because it is an eligible activity. However, just to let you know, just because the community said it does have some outside influences also, and so if that is something that the HRC feels doesn't rate as high for this community, that's certainly, versus all these other worthy needs, then that's something that you can also determine.
Further comments from other commissioners on item 3?
I think it's a high priority. I believe it's a high priority.
Is the concern here about sort of the populations that the job programs would target? Or
No.
No.
More specifically, what the programs would be.
Okay. Can you clarify?
For a lot of the other programs, I thought there was a lot more specific dive into what the priority item how it would address that priority.
Okay.
I have a question. What are the implications of rating something as high or medium? Like, let's say if the city council agrees that something is, these are in the high category, these are in the medium category, what are the implications therefore for funding and resources? Would it mean that, for example, if we rated this category, sorry, just trying to scroll back to it, of sustainable jobs and income equality, if we put it down to medium instead of high, would a smaller percentage of CDBG funds be allocated toward it? I'm just trying to understand the practical implications. Or would staff time be more limited to devote to that? Or
what happens?
Yeah, what happens?
It would be more for the allocation of funds because, as you know, for example, public services are always oversubscribed by like a 4-to-1 ratio or something like that. So again, they're all worthy causes, but if you're matching up a public service for this versus that, and if one, it could come down to if in the con plan it's a high priority for this and a median priority for that, then that could be the deciding factor. It really does just depend. But again, all these could be rated high priorities without even flinching, but to make those tougher decisions going through each of these needs.
Other thoughts from commissioners? My preference would be to make it a medium priority, not to say it's not a high priority otherwise, but there are many issues around housing and homelessness prevention. And if you don't have housing, you really can't keep a job, let alone get educated on a new field or worry about income equality. So I think my preference would be to make it a medium. but I would want everyone, consensus around that.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Sylvester. I think that we should make it a medium. If you don't have housing, then you can really have a sustainable job or income equality. So, thank you.
Quick straw poll, does everyone agree with me and Commissioner Romero to make it a medium priority? Raise your hand if you do.
I think it's high, but I'll go along with the.
You don't have to, just raise your hand if you think medium or.
Yeah, I can kind of go either way too.
And high?
But
Linda?
I'm okay with.
I mean, they're all high priorities. This is really difficult without caveats. So just a quick vote then. Do we agree priority 4, housing, whoops, I just flipped the page. Housing, or 3, sustainable jobs and income equality, priority now, medium. Does everyone agree with this priority? If you don't, Annette, that's okay. Annette, did you want to make a comment?
No, that one's a pretty complex one. I think that in such a simple statement, I'm not sure. But if it's, well, I guess, can I ask, I mean, this is based on the data that was collected from the community. So my thing, okay, now I'm leaning back towards where, no, sorry. So if this does reflect what the community says, then it sounds like it's what the community considers as high. So I agree with Commissioners Romero and Sylvester as well that, you know, housing is probably pretty fundamental for that. But I guess I feel a little bit, a little bit torn between the two, just because it sounds like that is what the community, that's based on community data. That's the only reason why, but I would be happy to go along with either way. I'm sort of middle.
I don't think.
I'm not that helpful with this.
I just wanted to clarify, because I had the same concern. It's not as though we're trying to overrule what the community says.
No.
We're just putting our input in for grist for the mill, I guess.
Definitely grist. My reading of the community data, I think, is potentially just a little bit different than staff's on this particular item.
I think too the challenge, and I say this based on, you know, working on a couple of needs and assets assessment projects through the HRC as well as outside the HRC, is, you know, when we have relatively small numbers. I mean, it was great to get, I think it was 180 something surveys, which is wonderful to get. But thinking about that as a very, very small percentage of, you know, of the entire city. And there were a couple of community forums as well, but just being hard to know if that high priority is generalizable to others in the city as well. Not to say that it's not important, and I think we all recognize it's important and it should be on this list as a priority need, but just wondering if the community input data and our thinking about the other items on this list and how they relate to each other, if we feel that would justify elevating this item to the high versus the medium priority level.
Was that a question, Julie?
I wasn't sure where that left us.
Sorry, it was just a reflection on the data. That's what I intended, just to reflect on the data, that I respect the community input and am involved in getting a lot of community input, but I find it also difficult to then generalize to the larger city and say, did the reflections of, you know, maybe 200 and something people, if you put all the Mountain View people together. Because the other thing I think I would add is that I appreciated reading a lot of the county data as well, but I could also see places where other parts of the county are different from Mountain View. And so I was trying to sort out, okay, for Mountain View specifically, which is what we're talking about here, but, you know, did the 200 and something people who gave input on Mountain View, to what extent is that reflective of the needs in the rest of the community?
question for staff. How important is it for you to hear what we feel about your priority levels on each item? For example, let's say we're just at a unbreakable tie or a really lengthy discussion on is it medium or high. Can we leave you with an approval of a priority and just say no consensus on it?
That's fine also. It's more to receive your input, a little direction. If HRC agrees with most of these needs, that's fine.
Great.
It's just based on your comments, from council comments, from community comments, all those type of things, we will,
Right.
refine the consolidated plan, so that's fine.
With that said, I would really, really like us to spend time providing you insights on things that we think need higher prioritization or are missing entirely. Otherwise, we're just fighting over, high-low. It's not going to take you anywhere. So if everyone agrees, may we skip a priority level for number 4, but agree that housing for special, I'm sorry, I keep flipping the paper. Can we agree that priority 3, sustainable jobs and income inequality, is a goal that we support, but without putting a priority level on it at this time? Raise your hand if you agree. Great. Thank you for that discussion. I think that helped us get through some process hiccups. Now I can talk about priority number 4, housing for special needs populations, priority level high. There is a wide range of populations listed, so I'm not going to read them all out. This is item 4, page 118. Does anyone have any comments or questions for each other or for staff? Seeing none, do we all agree that this is a priority? And for this one, do we agree it's a high-level priority?
Yes.
Priority number 5, reduce housing planning inconsistencies with medium priority. Does anyone have any questions for staff on that? I hear that question already, Linda. I already have it. Staff, I think we're probably going to want a little bit of clarification on what this is. I understand what it means in the description, but what, from a practical perspective, does it actually mean?
It's just sometimes when an affordable housing project gets built or proposed, how can the city help expedite its development, whether it be, as many jurisdictions do, waive some fees to make it a little more financially feasible. It goes to the front of the line. For example, in the city here, we have this gatekeeper process, but if it's an affordable housing project,
No gatekeeper.
yeah, no gatekeeper. So those type of things that, time is money. So this does help in addition to helping provide financial assistance, time is money. So to help move these projects along in an efficient and expedited manner.
Are there anything in particular in our current processes that could possibly be reduced? I mean, like anything really specific?
At this point, I think the city does a wonderful job in moving affordable housing developments through. Sometimes there are outside factors, financing sources, those things that do take time. So, but in terms of the land entitled process, I think the city does a very good job.
I agree with you. Well, with that said, I do remember that there were a lot of, I think, public comments from the online survey in particular, where people assumed that this was a problem in the city, and that's how it got upvoted so much, that there was some sort of bureaucratic process that got in the way. That's how it felt when I read some of the comments, but I'm not sure. Anyway, does anyone else have any comments or questions on this one?
I have a question. Do things like when people want to approve, I can't remember the name of it, but it's like a kind of sometimes referred to as a mother-in-law unit.
ADU type thing?
Yes. And I know over time, I've heard on occasion people make comments in the public comment period in city council meetings about concerns about the bureaucracies and the challenges of, and I'm just wondering, does that kind of thing fall under here? In other words, efforts to streamline processes for those kinds of units? Is that part of this?
I don't believe so. I understand the importance of creating more efficient ADU process to increase that overall housing stock, but in general, CDBG is for deed-restricted affordable housing, focusing on CDBG and home. It's mostly deed-restricted, 80% or below. ADU may help in be naturally affordable, but this is more targeted, deed-restricted affordable housing.
Other comments or questions? Okay, show of hands on priority number 5, reducing housing planning inconsistencies with priority as medium. In approval? If not, I think that's unanimous. Thank you. Priority number 6, homelessness prevention, priority level high. Is there an extremely high priority? Again, the list of populations served is listed here, and it looks very comprehensive.
Very important.
Maybe just a comment to staff for me that the populations that are, most at risk are the most important, which I guess, chronic homelessness, and there are a whole lot of families that could easily fall into the pipeline of homelessness. So I think just emphasizing at-risk populations in this is really important to me, to clarify that.
And this is referring to programs, whereas before we were talking about availability of housing. So this is referring to programs, I believe.
Microphone?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm trying to determine, I was talking out loud about whether this is just for programs, but I see now highlighted, it talks about facilities as well. But that would be facilities where programming is provided, I think. So I do think that this is mostly around programs.
But it can include facility shelter, because a good way to prevent homelessness is to have permanent supportive housing or housing for extremely low-income households, those type of things.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners? I think with that said, show of hands if you support priority number 6, homelessness prevention, priority high. Priority number 7, increasing mental health services, priority medium. The population is stated here: homeless, chronically homeless, and persons with disabilities or mental illness. I was just about to ask.
I was too. I think is the way the description is worded is provide enhanced care for mentally disabled individuals and the families or agencies providing care. I think there's certainly a broad need for a variety of types of mental health services, including for people who would not be considered mentally disabled. Yes. But my question is, I recognize that this is specific to CBD, I can never say that acronym, the acronym that starts with a C, and home. And so is that the reason why it's more narrowly focused? Or do we have the latitude to say, if we agree as a commission, that there are broader mental health needs that really need to be addressed?
I would say you do have the latitude. Just going back to CDBG and home does not can't be used, but CDBG Public Services, transitional, such as Graduate House, funded Quetzal, which was for transitioning you, or transitioning out of foster care. So it's up to the HRC to, if you would like to strike disabled, then add a few more groups. And
I was just going to say that's such a good point, because I have seen mental illness and disability connected throughout.
Right.
So it's not, so I agree with, I think that's a very good point. Not all mentally ill people are disabled. It could be children in high school that are attending school. Could be a lot of different things. So if we could somehow break that linkage.
or we could just revise the language to
Correct.
make it a little more inclusive for the mental health community, if you will.
Yeah, or people experiencing mental health challenges. So someone may be experiencing a mental health challenge, but not necessarily get a medical diagnosis of, either being disabled or having a mental illness.
True.
And I think, and I'm thinking about, in particular, one interview for our immigrant needs and assets assessment with someone working in the high schools, talking about the need, and I think I've mentioned this to the HRC before, so I apologize for repeating, but for staff that, for example, there are more young people in schools here in Mountain View who are coming from situations of severe trauma as they've gotten, so immigrants who've gotten to the US and are in need of mental health services that just aren't easily available right now to address the level, the depth, the type of trauma that they experienced before coming to the US and during the journey. So that's just one example of a kind of service that seems to be lacking. But those, I'm quite sure that not all of the individuals who need that kind of service would be classified as disabled or even as having a mental illness.
True.
Good clarification.
And just to clarify what I've heard, I think we wanted to add youth as a specific call-out, or I know we want to make sure this language is very inclusive. So do we want to include youth? Do we want to include any other specific bullet points?
I'm in favor of including youth.
Excellent.
Just calling them out.
Any other groups of folks? Or otherwise, just youth, round that out?
Well, it's not exclusively for homeless and chronic homeless. It's, or youth.
Right.
Right. So it could be, but you've targeted those populations because we're looking at low to moderate income levels. Is that why? Because that, I would think it could affect anyone.
That is correct. Yes, you're correct. CDBG and home primarily, it's for low and very low income households.
That's right.
Regardless of situation, but these are maybe just some of those groups that were called out as part of the survey, community survey, but youth is certainly one of those populations.
I would like to add seniors as well, especially given what we've learned about the impact on their housing. Good. Let's see, do we have a show of hands for people who agree with priority 7, increased mental health services, and priority medium? We actually didn't talk about the priority, but does everyone agree with it?
I feel it should be a high priority.
I think 4 to 1. I think in cases where we're not unanimous, I say we just have not given formal input on it.
Well, there's a majority. So
True. Staff, what would you prefer?
Staff can just report that these were all supported by a majority vote. We don't have to say unanimous, we can just say a majority vote.
Okay,
and I
that's
think
fine.
that conveys the HRC's sentiments.
Perfect. Linda, do you have a comment? No. We're almost to the home stretch before we start adding our own ideas. Uh, Speeding it up, priority number 8, fair housing representation, priority medium. I have a question for staff right off the bat. Are we going to be discussing this particular topic next month? I know we're talking about fair housing next month.
Yes, in part. This, I think, really addresses access to fair housing services. The AFH talks about affirmatively furthering fair housing, so it's more of a proactive plan how to reach those underrepresented groups. It will identify fair housing impediments that some of this may address, but it's a slightly different emphasis.
Okay, thank you for that. Does anyone have any questions or comments? No. Going once, twice, 3 times. Show of hands, does everyone agree with the priority fair housing representation, priority medium? Looks unanimous. And lastly, priority number 9, improve internet access and speed, priority medium. Yeah. Comments from the commission?
Just a comment. You can improve the access, but you can't improve the extent to which a low-income person can actually make use of the internet because of lack of funding. I mean, it can be accessed everywhere. People can access it, but you have to be able to afford to pay for internet in order to get to it.
True.
So.
Oh, but I understood that part of this was about, was it about, maybe I misunderstood, but about expanding free internet access as well?
Oh.
Yeah, okay, I see.
Oh, it is?
I see a nod there.
I didn't read long enough.
Yeah,
Where is
that
it?
was how I understood it. And I was going to comment that I appreciated reading the public input about it because I realized that I was kind of in my own bubble about this, thinking that in Mountain View, like, everybody has access in some way and it's easy. So I just want to say that I appreciated reading the public comments about the challenges that people have had.
Other comments? Linda?
I did.
Fernando?
Yes, I would like to comment I think there's a lot of low, or I don't know how many low-income people that probably don't have internet access at home. And I know, I think the city of San Jose, they have a partnership with, they call it San Jose Approach to Closing the Digital Divide. So I think they, through a fund that they get in, they providing free internet to households. And I don't know if the city of Mountain View can do something like that, maybe partner with, in this particular case, the city of San Jose, let me see if I get this right. They partner with, sorry about that. I believe it's the California Emerging Technology Fund. So, sorry, I was just briefly reading about this, but anyway.
So it's possible to get it free?
Yeah, I don't know if they're looking through funds. It might be possible for the city of Mountain View to get free internet for households of, low-income households. So.
Children who don't have access to the internet can quickly fall behind.
True.
It's very important. They can't keep up.
I think we have consensus, or close enough, show of hands. If you agree with improving internet access and speed as a priority with priority level medium.
I don't see any. I don't see it mentioning, am I missing it? It doesn't say anything about free? It's just talking about enhancing broadband installation and capacity.
It does not. Unless you think access would include fiscal access. Do you want to call that out to staff?
I do, because it's not just having it so that everybody can have the latest broadband, but if in a household, if they cannot afford it, then the children doesn't do any good to the people in the home if they don't have the money to pay for it. So there must be maybe a way to have it on a sliding scale or something like that for people, or through the schools or library.
Again, just, yes, we can certainly put that in, and so if there are two, I don't want to say competing, there are two applications side by side, one to provide free internet or reduced price versus affordable housing, or that's where this will come in place. But we can absolutely put in access to free internet as part of this priority need. Okay. Or affordable internet access. Okay.
Great. Now I would like it to open up. I think we should go commissioner by commissioner. If you have any needs you feel should be identified that were not or called out more specifically inside of this, I think we should just do that. And just, actually, let's go, how should we best do this? Well, first of all, does anyone have anything that they would like to ask to be added to the list of identified needs? I'm seeing a maybe.
Yeah, well, there are two topics that I had questions about. I don't think, once the questions are addressed, for one, I don't think it's going to rise to the top priority, and actually for the other one either, but they were two issues that were referenced in the report, but one I found hard to follow through, and the other one was only mentioned in one sentence, and I was really surprised. So,
bring it.
Okay. Why don't I start with that one, because I foreshadowed it by mentioning
Yes,
it earlier, and that is about earthquake retrofitting.
Right.
And I have a couple comments on that. So there was a reference to that. The only one I could find in both the plan and the public input document, the summary of public input, was in the plan. There was one sentence about it on page 86. A reference to soft-story buildings being susceptible to earthquake damage. No one from the public gave input, but I have a couple comments. One is that the data that were referenced about the percentage of housing units in Mountain View that are soft construction, that is from, I believe, the Housing Element Report 2015 to 23. It says 7% based on the San Jose State University study from 2003. However, the city put out another report, and that came out in May 2018. That's Bonowitz's report, and that has a very different number. And this was talked about in a Mountain View Voice article, or actually several articles. That later report says 16% of the housing stock in Mountain View is soft construction. So I just wanted to call out that what's in the report is the older data source based on the San Jose State, and I think it's important to reference there's another data source. The experts can argue over the methodology and see, you know, but the later study was not referenced at all, and since the numbers are quite disparate, I did want to call that out. And I wondered, I was really surprised that there was only one sentence about it here, because, so I looked quickly at that later report, the Bonowitz, May 2018, and it lists the parcels, I believe by parcel in Mountain View that have soft construction. I just eyeballed it, but I think that probably it's the folks who, like low moderate income folks who tend to be living in a lot of those constructions, and therefore they're at greater risk in an earthquake. And at the same time, I don't know, and I couldn't readily find information on Mountain View's latest plan to address soft structures. And, you know, there's this whole question of, is it required that landlords make the retrofit, or is it recommended, and who pays for it? So I felt like people in the lower income category end up at the greatest risk if they are the ones living in these structures, and they're the ones least able to pay for the retrofitting. So because of that, I was just surprised that there was only one sentence about it in the report. And so I just wanted to know, you know, maybe it's being addressed in through a different pathway, not through this mechanism, but just wanted to understand more about that need.
I can give it a shot, and then Audrey.
Sorry, that was so long, sorry.
As part of the report, the city is still going through a soft story retrofit evaluation right now. I think the first step is a survey of all the various structures in the city, and then based on that survey, the city will move forward. I don't know if it's required or not, how they plan on enforcing the soft story, but that effort is already underway. In regards to using soft story with CDBG, if a CDBG applicant such as Bridge Housing came in and applied for rehabilitation funds, that's certainly one of the things that we would want them to address on that voluntary basis. But I believe the soft story is, I'm not sure if it's a voluntary program or not, in regards to the next steps after the survey.
Yeah, I don't believe that those determinations have yet been made. And, you know, many of those buildings would be covered under the CSFRA because they are of an age that is covered by the rent control. And so there are specific procedures that are set up for the property owner to pay for those retrofits. So in terms of it being a burden for low-income people, it's the responsibility of the multifamily property owners for rental properties. So for properties that are owner-occupied, then I would imagine if they are serving low-income people, they could be eligible for CDBG. But I don't know that that would likely be the case for the owner-occupied buildings.
And if Measure D had passed, though, that would have, I mean, I was thinking about that this week leading up to the election. I think that would have actually allowed, I'm not sure how much of the cost of retrofitting to be passed on to the tenants. So I guess it's possible there could be a change in the future if there's a ballot measure or whatever that could pass that cost on to tenants. Yeah.
It was a little more complex than that. Moving along. Julie, you said
you. Yes. I did have one other item, so thank you for indulging me on that item. I had a question about unaccompanied minors who become homeless, because when I was looking at the numbers, I think the numbers were different in terms of how many units or beds, I should say, are available because they weren't all measuring the same thing. So I think it was Quetzal House, although it was not named as such, serves 40 youth. But there seemed to be a table and some bullets that repeated that said that in the entire county, there are only 23 emergency shelter beds for unaccompanied youth. I saw that in two places in the report, in a table and in some bullets. Let's see, that's on page 90 and also on page 91. And there were some tables where I wasn't sure if it was talking about the county or the city, but I was thinking, especially seeing the other numbers, page 61 that talked county-wide about the needs for youth and young adults for beds. I just thought, oh my gosh, how can we be in a county that has only 23 beds for unaccompanied minors? And I wondered in Mountain View what the need is, and I was trying to find if there was a table that, and I might have missed it, that I wanted to understand if we have homeless unaccompanied minors, and if so, if there are beds and services for them.
I don't know offhand in regards to unaccompanied minor, homeless, or homeless minors. That's something that we could probably take a look at in the 2019 point in time census.
Yeah.
We have rough not overall numbers, the 460 some odd sheltered and unsheltered homeless persons, but we can go back and take a look in the actual survey or census itself to see how many actual minors, if you will, are in the city. That I just don't know off the top of my head.
Did I understand correctly on the table on page 90 and the bullets on page 91 that the county has 23 emergency shelter beds? That's it?
Those may be specifically dedicated to versus, and so we can clarify that, but I think that's dedicated beds specifically for emancipated youth, unaccompanied minor, homeless minors, those type of things, those type of minors.
Thank you. Thank you.
I seem to remember from prior grants that there was a home here somewhere for youth, maybe LGBT.
Quetzal House is for youth, right? And they seem to have more beds, so, but some of them are for youth transitioning out of foster care who wouldn't count maybe as unaccompanied minors, so that's why I was having trouble understanding the numbers. But I was just trying to get a sense of, in the county, I think we're short. If you go to downtown San Jose, it's obvious that we're short on beds for minors. But here in Mountain View, I was wondering, do we have unaccompanied minors who are homeless, who are on the street, who are sleeping in cars, and just to try to understand if there's an unmet need there.
We can look into that, so we'll
Thank
let you know.
Do any other commissioners have other ideas for needs that should be identified and called out? Julie? No? Your light is on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just to sort of go back to mental health, I think there's a real need for services, not just for low income, but middle income people. They don't qualify for any of the aid out there that may be happening, and yet oftentimes they're mortgaging their house or anything to get someone care who needs mental health services. And there's a tremendous lack of beds. So, I mean, that's just a real concern that I have. Because I've seen it happen in my life, you know, where there's just no services for young people at all, or anyone who has a severe mental health issue and needs to be hospitalized. There aren't any beds for them, and there's very little services. So I just raise that as a concern.
Other ideas from commissioners? Seeing none, I would like to add a few. Food insecurity is something that came up in the community surveys, in the community forums, and was referenced quite a few times in the report itself, but it never made it to the top of the list of identified needs. And I've been hearing more and more about food insecurity because rents are going up, so people aren't eating. I would like to see that brought forward. I'm very concerned about the long-term health impacts, especially on children. I had hoped to see transitional and shelter-based housing called out as its own unique need, because I think we are definitely short on year-round shelter beds, and it's mentioned somewhere else, but I'd like to see it called out as its own unique need, and as well as transitional housing. Another idea I thought for a need that could be identified, is income stabilization. So if people are having a lot of trouble paying 60 or more % of their income on rent, what other programs can be identified to give people help on their costs, such as food, childcare, transportation, and other things that reduce their overall income burden to make their housing situation more secure. I do know that sustainability and transportation came up a lot in community comments. This is more of a question. I didn't know how that would necessarily relate to this particular plan, but there was a lot of conversation in the report about walkability, traffic safety, traffic in general. I know people just talk about those things no matter what, but I didn't know if there would be, if that really fit within the consolidated plan or not. And sustainability too. There is definitely an affordable housing component there, but
In terms of safety, some of those things can be included. For example, CDBG is used for ADA accessibility items, and it still goes back to whether that area is still a low-income block group or what have you. We still have to do that due diligence, if you will, but there can be, although, yeah, like many of these other needs, they're all just worthy needs. And in regards to sustainability, CDBG is eligible for energy efficiency upgrades and remodels.
we've seen that in a couple of the proposals tonight, I think, mentioned.
Yes, but it's not a
requirement.
a targeted
Right.
goal, if you will.
Okey doke. That's all I had. Thank you very much. I think, Christina, we've made, well, it says a motion is required, but I'm not sure what we'd be motioning on at this point. Motion to accept the priorities given, and then motion to accept the comments from commissioners. So what would the motion be?
Certainly, yeah, you could, you can have a motion to accept the priorities as presented, and then to have staff include the comments that were made by the commission to include in the report to the council, the recommendations to council. Does that sound about right, Tim?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
Sounds great.
as part of the council staff report, we will put in HRC discussion regarding needs and eventually
Comments
the
and
goals.
concerns. And great. Just want to check in with my fellow commissioners. Is everyone ready for a motion? Great. I'll make the motion, since I made a half-hearted attempt at it already. I motion, this time with feeling. I motion that we accept the staff's proposal as noted, but with comments as noted, including prioritization levels as noted. So we accept all 9. And to also include the recommendations as made by HRC members to add to that list. That's an awkward motion. Would anyone like to second?
I will second. Oh, please.
Please.
I will second the motion.
All in, I assume, don't need a roll call. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, home stretch. Now we're gonna start using sports metaphors. Sorry, I've got the pile of paper in front of me actually has somehow managed to increase over the. It's probably, I put it away already. Okay, we are on to question number 2. Does the HRC agree with the proposed consolidated plan goals? And are there any additional goals that the HRC would like to add? Just to focus us this time, I'm going to recommend that we look at the lovely chart on page 135 and use those as our discussion point, just so we have one point of starting. Does everyone have, oh, I see, the PDF is getting pulled up. I think it's page 135. I have a funny feeling we're going to repeat ourselves a little bit, but probably add a lot more specific information. So if staff is ready, I will start. Goal number 1, establish homeless preventions and programs. provide needed and essential homeless prevention services and programs. Such programs and activities will assist homeless or at-risk homeless individuals and families in the following ways: crisis intervention, service for at-risk families, shelter intake services, and job training and search assistance and other vital social services. These are goals that do not have a priority level set on them. It's just agreeing to the goal.
Can I ask a question on this? Is there
Absolutely.
establish homeless preventions and programs? Is there a word missing, like homeless prevention services and programs, or?
We'll be happy to put in homeless prevention services and programs. Yeah.
Also, when it says establish, it suggests that the priority is to create something new as opposed to supporting existing homeless services and programs. Is that intentional?
If there is that gap, in addition, because it does say provide, but if there are always gaps in homeless services.
Sure.
So if we can identify any gaps, that's why the establish is in there.
Okay, but the intent is not just to focus on the new services, but to help the existing. So, yeah.
It's not to fund or just establish brand new homeless
Yeah.
services. No.
Okay.
It's to support existing plus any potential gap and therefore establish.
You might want to, the verb is established.
Okay, then we'll be happy to revise that to support and establish or something along those lines. Establish and support, that's
Nice.
fine also.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners? If not, I would like to add a few specific ideas in terms of prevention, including anti-displacement measures, housing rehabilitation, financial incentives to affordable housing providers, and what I mentioned earlier, helping people financially with other costs in their life so that their rent is more easily paid. So I'd just like to add some specifics to it. And yeah. Any other comments? I guess you just are looking for our upvote on this? Great. Show of hands, who approves of goal number 1, establish homeless, whatever we agree the title should be. Number 1. Great. Moving along, goal name, good one. Goal 2, respond to lack of housing for homeless. Assist the homeless population by creating additional homeless shelter spaces, emergency and permanent, addressing RV conditions, identifying designated safe parking, addressing shelter maintenance, utility, and internet access. Yeah, that is it. Questions and comments from the commission?
Well, I do see, I think lower down, you're going to talk about housing for the disabled.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's not just the homeless, it's a number of people that we want to provide housing for. Thank you.
I had just a clarification question. What does addressing RV conditions mean?
Well, that came from a lot of community input at one of our meetings, is how to potentially help those residing in RVs. That could, so.
I didn't know if it meant addressing the quality of the vehicles or their life or something.
I think all of the above. It's just to recognize that they had brought that up numerous times in the RV conditions.
Could we change that to addressing RV, I'm trying to think of the way to put it, the needs of RV dwellers? Or is there
Or just
something that clarifies?
addressing the RV situation?
At least to me,
Or-
that's a little bit more clear, but I'd also be concerned if that means, again, the RVs, the fact that they're parked on the street, or the people inside. So.
Okay, well, understanding your direction, we will work on clarifying this statement.
Sorry, I don't feel like a novelist right now. I'm not feeling particularly grammatically correct. But it just, to me, it's just so confusing, and you just said a lot that could be added if there's a way to make it smaller. So thank you. Anyone else?
Just a minor point, for RV conditions, or, can we change that to vehicle dwellers instead of, because there are a lot of people living in cars as well as.
That's true. Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We can talk about the vehicle dweller community or something like that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I forgot one ad, and I don't know if this is the best place to address it, but we do need more caseworkers for case management of those on the brink of homelessness or in transitional housing, in cars, coming out of cars. Even if we have safe parking lots, we don't have we need more capacity to help them make it to the transitional stage. Any other comments? Seeing none, I guess show of hands. Do we approve goal number 2, respond to lack of housing for homeless? Homeless, yeah. Was that unanimous? Great. Goal number 3, increase affordable housing. This is long. I think it speaks for itself. Does anyone have any comments or questions on the item as written? I don't know if this would be the right place for it. To Linda's point earlier, I would like to be able to, it's a little bit addressed here, but I'm addressing the missing middle, the moderate income families. I think they're, in the different reports that you gave us, so many comments were made about how to help the missing middle with loan assistance, down payment assistance, building more housing in a category they can afford. So I would really, really like to call that out. Affordable, I guess it's affordable housing for all.
Unfortunately, since CDBG goes up to 80% AMI, it cannot address the missing middle issue. The city is working on addressing that outside of CDBG, but it can't be.
Does the city have an official definition for missing middle in terms of cost or in terms of income?
Generally, missing middle starts from 80 to 120, maybe 120 to 200% AMI. Those are the more common definitions of missing middle. But since this is only limited to 80% AMI or below.
Other comments then? Do we all approve goal number 3, increase affordable housing? Fernando? You don't have to, I mean, just making sure. Goal number 4, provide programs for youth and families. Continue support for youth programs, including sports, mental health, parenting classes, a focus on family civility training, basics of etiquette, diversity awareness, cultural sensitivity, and good city stewardship. Also access to childcare, school safety, and better collaboration with schools.
Basics of etiquette, civility.
You're light.
Sorry. Can you describe civility training for such things as basics of etiquette? Oh, sorry, I still didn't. The whole thing here about civility training for such things as basics of etiquette.
Those may not necessarily be eligible services, but I think it just kind of demonstrate what type of programs they may.
Well, like teaching people how to interview and, not
Certainly
to chew
those,
gum or,
job training programs or how to interview certainly can be factored in. Yeah, maybe not etiquette or those type of things, but we'll scratch out etiquette.
Yeah.
And
I think I think I know what you mean, but it kind of conjures up images of which fork or knife am I supposed to use at the table, kind of thing. Is it? I mean, the civility about how to interact with others in a respectful way. I think that's maybe what it refers to. Here.
What I recall from to your point, I recall the residents conveying the message of from no littering, teaching the youth about littering, teaching the youth about, I think they mentioned bullying. So trying to connect and help the youth become more familiar with, in this case, kind of the norms of, I guess, of society and being able to, that's what this sentence is trying to convey. But
Civic participation,
right.
Something about civic participation, perhaps.
We'll refine this description
Great.
to maybe better suit CDBG programs, if you will.
Is there any space within the CDBG, like confines for like services for pregnant women or things like that? The prenatal aspect of it, or postnatal?
I would think so from the services standpoint, or maybe for clinics, if they could show, for example, a clinic that serves a neighborhood, a neighborhood clinic could fold in that. So I think something that specific we'd definitely have to evaluate, but I think so. I think it would be eligible for public services.
Something that speaks to women who are pregnant or recently given birth.
I believe so. I mean, we give money to CSA and,
True.
and some of those community outreach services, so I would think so.
Okay.
I would also like to see the description of family include seniors. We have many multi-generational households in the city of Mountain View, and those are often the ones at most risk. It's noted that things like childcare would be included. I think it would also be nice to see support for elder care and elder programs.
Okay, just to point out, seniors does fall under special needs populations, but
Well, it also feels like it would fall under the needs of the multi-generational families as well.
understood. Okay.
Great. Any other comments? So do we agree with Goal 4, provide programs for youth and families? Unanimous. Moving along, Goal 5, support opportunities for special needs populations. Provide programs, funding, and services for special needs populations, including, but not limited to, abused and abandoned children, mental and preventative health services, victims of domestic violence, seniors, and physically disabled. Comments from the commission?
Yeah, just a clarification so in the description, it says special needs populations including, so abused and abandoned children are a population, but mental and preventive health services isn't a population? So I'm not sure what that piece refers to.
Who it refers to. Right?
Yeah, is that supposed to be connected to one of the populations here or all of them?
I think that can be made available to all of them. That's a good point. This obviously are services, not necessarily a population.
Right,
so
right.
We can strike that. Obviously, because they're I think mental health and preventive health services can benefit all these groups. So
Yes,
we'll just
absolutely.
remove it.
Okay.
And
Perfect.
I think that can fall under any of the other goals.
Great comment. Any other? Annette?
If you're gonna remove it, I'm not sure, so if we limit the disabled description from just only physical to also include like developmentally or mentally as well, or just strike the physical so that it just means disabled like broadly, because I don't think it should just be limited to that.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Julie? Julie?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, just looking, does anyone else have anything else to add? Okay, great. We're getting faster. Do we support Goal 5, support opportunities for special needs populations? Unanimous. Goal number 6, creating sustainable jobs and increasing earning capacity. We talked a lot about this earlier. Supporting economic development activities that improve education and skills training in primarily the professional, scientific, and technical services, information services, and manufacturing industries. Activities that create vital partnerships that create opportunities for employment, workforce development, and readiness programs. Comments? Questions? I think I asked a version of this question earlier, but just curious what kinds of training and skills would be encouraged under this? Is there a vision of what that might be?
There's no vision. It's just to make it eligible. For example, I don't know, the day worker program. If they wanted to apply for CDBG funds, this goal would capture that type of proposal or application, I should say.
Sure, understood. Other comments or questions?
So, for example, ESL would be under education.
I don't know if it'd fall under that goal since we're talking about job capacity. It very may well. Yeah, no, that's one of those things where it's a goal, but if, again, competing interests or two applications come in, both goals, that's where something that the HRC could deliberate about.
Great.
The applicability or the eligibility, if you will.
More questions or comments? Do we agree with goal number 6, creating sustainable jobs and increasing earning capacity? Great. We're an easy bunch. Goal number 7, improving community and public facilities, supporting a higher quality of life through enhanced community and public facilities and infrastructure, including recreational spaces, community and social service facility upgrades, existing public infrastructure such as streets, sidewalks, curbing, and other public facilities, internet access, safe routes to school, addressing public safety concerns. Does anyone have any comments or questions on this short-sounding but far-reaching category?
Why would replacing streets be I'm just questioning why would, improving public infrastructure be in this category, like building streets and improving streets and all that? Is that under low income?
It could be if there is, not Mountain View specifically, but there are some blighted areas that you could use the funds to do streets, or in Mountain View, what we've done for sidewalks is, again, ADA accessibility, ADA ramps, or if the sidewalks aren't level, those type of things.
Any other questions or comments, Annette?
Is there a way to, not to say that Mountain View does this, but there are certain like municipalities and things that have sort of like anti-homeless, like improvements, like they make it less comfortable to sleep on the benches or less, or whatever, like little things like that. They put bumps in places just to sort of, to sort of discourage folks from sleeping on the sidewalks, things like that. Is there any way to, just for me, I think that that's a very, like, it's something that could be construed as a public facility, like a public safety or some, and I think there's, history of that. Is there a way to limit this goal in some way that would prevent that to be included in this?
Well, excuse me, with the vetting of these public funds going through the NOFA process, if that is something that is proposed. Certainly, if there are members of the community, or if the community opposes that they can certainly speak up against that type of proposal, such as here, if, I'm not saying the park would propose anything like that, but if they did, during this public comment period, that's where the community could oppose those type of measures, if anybody did submit an application for that type of thing.
I guess I'm concerned about if there are going to be any guardrails. Maybe this is like not the place to put it, but maybe in like somewhere where there would be more detail, but some sort of guardrail against the sort of like NIMBY like type of mentality that can sometimes, even in like public comment or something, not to say that that's not important, but it's just, to sort of protect those who might not have as strong of a voice.
If I might, it seems hard for me to picture an application that would come in with its purpose of preventing homeless people from enjoying the public infrastructure would be meeting the needs, or rather meeting the goals of the consolidated plan, where the purpose is to improve community and public facilities. And so for an application to come in with a stated goal to have infrastructure that prevents use by homeless folks, it's hard to see that would be something that would fit the requirements of use of CDBG funds.
If it were to appear, I would assume that it would be pretextual instead of explicit. But I'm just saying, just the term public safety concern, like that, I know historically like that's been used in the past, and of course I'm not saying Mountain View, but other municipalities. I'm just, maybe if that can be massaged in a way that wouldn't, I can't come up with anything off the top of my head right now, but just like putting it out there as a concern.
It's that particular language around addressing public safety concerns that is triggering for you?
Because like if transience or homelessness or something disruptive behavior has been used as like sort of pretext or just sort of as a hidden meaning that like actually what we mean is we don't want people sleeping here, or we don't want people pitching tents here. We don't want people, say at Stevens Creek Boulevard, like hiding in the woods and like camping out there. Things like that. Not sure how, I don't know. So, I don't know.
That's something we can consider, but
yeah, that's just what I'm saying is like to make it.
Public safety concerns, I think historically, CDBG funds in like a low-income neighborhood, they've been able to install, not construct like a fire station or those type of community facilities versus those.
I understand. It's like, I know the folks here, like we would have to dig into our imaginations to be able to figure out like a project that would even like fit that and also have that outcome. But I just to put it out there. Yeah, thanks.
May I just ask about the term, just prior to that, safe routes to school infrastructure? Does that mean safe routes to school facilities?
That could be bike lanes.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's infrastructure for safe routes to school.
It could be, yes.
Okay, okay, I understand now. Got it, thank you.
Other comments? And by the way, I second Annette's concern and thoughts on that. I don't think anything would ever happen like that, but it is a phrase often used with other context in mind. So do we approve Goal 7, improve community and public facilities? Yes. Woohoo. I think that was unanimous. Goal number 8, address and promote fair housing. Continue to collaborate with social service entities and the county to provide assistance for families and individuals seeking counseling and/or legal solutions to fair housing and discrimination problems. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, do we approve goal number 8, address and promote fair housing? Unfortunately, flip over your paper. There's more. There's one more. We're almost there.
Let me, unless the HRC really wants to make this a goal, we don't need to.
I wondered about it.
We don't, we shall strike this. It shouldn't have been.
I think we will agree with that.
Okay.
Wow, now is the exciting time where if we feel any goals are missing, we, the HRC, can put them forth. Does anyone feel that they have other goal areas they would like to add? Just letting the thoughts bubble up. Going once, twice, and I think sold. I didn't mean to rush that. No one leaned forward at all. So great. I guess a motion is in order. Is that correct, Christina? Just a motion to approve goals 1 through 8, I guess, to be specific. HRC that I'll make the motion. I motion that we approve goals 1 through 8 with the HRC comments made therein. Would anyone like to second my motion?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great. Okay, deep breath time. We're almost done. The pile of paper is shifting all over. And yeah, thank you to the member of the public who is still with us. Thank you. Thank you. You just made everyone's night, so thank you.
Good.
Wow.
And we're glad to see you here.
I realize that Tim and Orlando would like to go home now. So thank you both for incredible work as always and putting up with our many, many, many questions and comments.
Yes, thank you for your patience.
With a smile on your face and
good
with
sense
great
of
data.
humor and very helpful information. Thank you very much.
Round of applause for them. Well deserved, definitely earned. Moving on to our final item, everyone's getting ready to go. Wait, there's more. Item 7, commission and staff comments, questions, and commission reports. As you know, we're not doing official commission report outs tonight because of the agenda as is. If any commission would, subcommittee, I should say, would like to report out, you may. As always, no action will be taken on any questions raised by the commission by the commission at this time. Does anyone want to report out about anything from their subcommittees or have anything else to share with us? No.
I'll share a few things. I attended the challenge team meeting at the police department on February 13th. It was the first time I ever went to that meeting, and it was very well attended. It was a packed room with a great breakfast. They gave us little Valentine's candies. It was very nice. There was a presentation on the 2020 California Children's Report Card, so that was really interesting with data, and California got lots of bad grades. I'll sum it up that way. But it was good to have that presentation and understand more about the data for California and for Santa Clara County. And there was also a presentation on PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis to prevent HIV infection among young people and how young people can locally can access PrEP. So also that day I attended the census party at the community center, and that was really fun and well done. And it was nice to see the different language groups. So, you know, speakers of English, Spanish, Russian, and Mandarin Chinese all together and having different activities and having all the interpreters there. So that was quite fun. And also, our Immigrant Needs and Assets Subcommittee is meeting next Wednesday to go over the survey data. So which will be really fun. And I will make sure I get that out to folks. So the quantitative analyses are done, and my RA and I are still, we're going to do as many of the qual analyses as we can, but I want to make sure you guys get the draft this weekend so you have some time to look at it. And also, I'm helping just a little bit, helping the Spanish Language Civic Academy, the multilingual community outreach program, to plan retrospective, meaning look back, and also prospective evaluation. So just providing some input through a few phone calls, and we're going to have a logic modeling session to articulate the theory of change. And that's to help, so Nancy Ducos from the program is spearheading this whole evaluation process and is very knowledgeable about evaluation. So it was a pleasure to speak with her about that. And it'll be fun to see the results of that assessment and how that can inform future academies in Spanish and or in other languages. And those are my announcements.
Thank you, Julie. Anyone else? For those of you who may be wondering, the CRT subcommittee will provide you an announcement early next week. With that said, I don't think I have any other announcements. No one else does.
I was just going to say, and that
sorry, staff comments, please.
No worries. That for the commission and the public's benefit, that we are actively monitoring the community spread of the coronavirus and developing city strategies that may affect city events and programs, and to stay tuned on that.
Thank you for saying what I did want to say directly.
Well, I said it indirectly also.
That's pretty direct, I thought. So thank you. But we do have beautiful flyers for the event on the 30th. If anyone wants to learn about what our marketing for the event wound up being and what it looks like, happy to share. We're very proud of this. If anyone wants to take a flyer and take a look, we'll update you later. With that said, I adjourn this meeting at 9:57 p.m. until we meet at our next scheduled meeting, which is scheduled for April 2nd, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. back here in the council chambers. And I'd like to thank you all for attending and for your great comments and your good spirit and good collaboration with each other, even at this incredibly not so nice hour. And again, thank you to the gallant member of the public. Thank you. Everyone stay safe and healthy and happy. Thank you. And wash your hands.